Chapter 175. Why is there an eagle's cry? Qin Feiyang left the castle with Wolf King. He quickly lay down in the grass and looked at the valley. Then, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. Above the cave, a huge falcon was circling in the air. There were at least 20 people in its 2 huge claws. Those people were all dead. Below the falcon stood a young man. It was Lin Chen. He glanced at the people in the falcon's claws and smiled at the falcon. These are a good harvest. I can refine more than 20 blood evil pills. The falcon's eyes flashed with a sharp light. The falcon loosened its claws. More than 20 corpses fell to the ground in front of Lin Chen with loud thuds. Lin Chen shouted, "Black Bear King, why are you still standing there? Hurry up and move them in." There was a trace of reluctance in the Black Bear King's huge eyes. But there was no other way. He had to do it. Lin Chen looked at it with disdain. He raised his head to look at Falcon and said, "Master has instructed us to capture more people tomorrow. As usual, do not hunt in Black Bear Mountain to avoid arousing suspicion." Chirp. The falcon let out a sharp cry, flapped its black wings, and rushed out of the valley. At the same time, a man and a wolf also entered the castle. After the falcon left, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King appeared again. These 2 bastards really used people to refine pills. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists. His eyes were full of murderous intent. He was not against killing people. After all, this was the law of survival. But using people to refine pills was simply inhumane. Such people could not be appeased even if they were cut into pieces. Wolf King said in a low voice, "Little Qinzi, calm down. Don't alert the enemy." This was a good opportunity. There could not be any accidents. Otherwise, if Zuan escaped, he did not know when he would be able to find him again. This point, Qin Feiyang also knew very well. So he suppressed the anger in his heart. Time flew. It was almost dawn, but there was still no news. What are they doing? Qin Feiyang frowned. It had already been an entire night. With the speed of the Martial King Hallmaster and the others, they should have arrived by now. The morning sun rose. All things were awakening. At this moment, Qin Feiyang's imaging crystal finally reacted. "Continue monitoring. Call me if you need anything." After instructing Wolf King, he entered the castle and took out the image crystal. Rays of light were emitted. Fatso's phantom appeared. Qin Feiyang said angrily, "Fatso, what are they doing? Why aren't you here yet?" Fatso said, "Coming. We are now in the forest in front of the canyon. Come over quickly." "Jungle?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. He frowned and asked, "Then what are you doing here?" "There's no other way. Ling Yunfei needs to cultivate, and Lu Hong doesn't want to come. We can only sacrifice Fat Lord this time." Fatty had a helpless expression on his face. Qin Feiyang thought about it carefully and understood. Only Ling Yunfei, Lu Hong, and Fatso had established a contract bridge with him. If the giants of the county of Yen wanted to contact him, they had to go through one of them. "I won't go over. You guys go around to the back of the canyon. I'll wait for you here. Remember, don't make any noise. Also restrain your aura," Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. "Okay." Fatso nodded. After turning off the imaging crystal, Qin Feiyang took an illusion form elixir and turned into Jiang Haotian's appearance. Then he left the castle, sent Wolf King into the castle, and ran to the foot of the mountain. In less than 100 breaths, 6 figures entered his sight. 2 of them were Fatso and Shizheng. Shizheng had also recovered his true appearance. Qin Feiyang had seen the martial arts hall master before, so he could naturally recognize him. As for the other 3, they all looked middle-aged. Although they had retracted their aura, one could tell at a glance that the 3 of them were not simple people, because their aura was too outstanding. His gaze was also extremely sharp, like the edge of a blade. A group of people walked over silently. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, seniors. Jiang Haotian, although I've been in Xingyue City, I've heard rumors about you every day. I've always been curious if you have 3 heads and 6 arms. But today, I see that you're no different from an ordinary person." The person who spoke was Luo Qingzhu's father, Jiang Jingyi. He was about 1.85 meters tall and slightly thin. He wore a fitted white robe, and there were spots of white hair at his temples. On his weathered face, there was an easygoing smile. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, Senior Jiang, these are all rumors. You can't take them seriously. Among the 4 giants of the county of Yin, only the chief pavilion master was in Xingyue City. So even if no one introduced him, he knew. Rumors? Jiang Jingyi was stunned. He shook his head and laughed. Qin Feiyang looked at the last person and cupped his hands. Senior, you must be the king of Yin. This person had a strong body. He wore a golden robe and a crown on his head. He exuded the aura of a king from head to toe. He was no stranger to this aura of a king. Moreover, only the county kings of the 18 counties were qualified to wear a crown. The king of Yin nodded and smiled faintly. Little brother, you've done a great job this time. When we catch Swordsman, I'll reward you handsomely. Thank you, king of Yin. Qin Feiyang thanked him and looked at the last person. This person was tall and straight. His eyebrows were as sharp as swords. There was no expression on his face, and he looked extremely cold. There was no doubt that this person was the hall master of the Danwang Hall. Greetings, senior. He bowed politely. The hall master of the Danwang Hall only nodded faintly. Qin Feiyang was too lazy to ask for a rebuff. He glanced at the 4 giants and said, Zhuan is on the other side of the mountain. Other than Elder Feng, the Black Bear King is also in his hands. I would like to ask the 4 of you to save them first before dealing with Zhuan. The hall master of the Danwang Hall immediately said, I don't agree. What if Zhuan escapes while we're saving them? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and asked, Senior, are you saying that you're going to sacrifice them? For the sake of the big picture, we can only sacrifice them. As the law-enforcing elder of the Pill Hall in Black Bear City, I believe that Feng Cheng is prepared to die. The hall master of the Danwang Hall said coldly. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists and said, Senior, if I may offend you, Elder Feng is not your slave. Why should he be sacrificed? Is this what you should say as the hall master of the Grand Hall Master? The hall master of the Danwang Hall raised his eyebrows and said faintly, This is the business of the Danwang Hall. Is it your business? Qin Feiyang said, Indeed, it's none of my business. However, I owe Elder Feng and the Black Bear King a debt of gratitude, even if I'm insignificant in front of you. I thought you didn't know your place. The hall master of the Danwang Hall said faintly. Qin Feiyang stared at him. His fists clenched tighter and tighter. Birds of a feather flocked together. He was the same as Jia He and Elder He. Such a person in the Danwang Hall. It's disgusting. All right. If you really want to sacrifice them, I don't have any objections. However, I'm afraid it's wishful thinking for you to catch Swan today. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. There was a trace of madness in his eyes. What are you trying to do? Do you believe that I won't kill you right now? The hall master of the Danwang Hall narrowed his eyes. There was a dangerous signal in his eyes. To be honest, I'm not afraid of you. Qin Feiyang sneered. All right, let's not talk too much. Ma Cheng, you are really something. No matter what, you are someone with status. How can you be so calculative with a member of the younger generation? Jiang Haotian is right. As the hall master of the Danwang Hall, you shouldn't have said such words. Seeing that the two were about to fall out, the people of Theta Wang Hall hurriedly tried to calm them down. The hall master of the Martial King Hall looked at Qin Feiyang and comforted him. Don't worry. Feng Cheng is also Feng Ling Heir's grandfather. I won't leave him in the lurch. Thank you, senior. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and thanked the hall master. He then looked at Ma Cheng and shook his head. This is the difference between people. Senior Ma Cheng, how can you accept this? A cold light flashed in the depths of Ma Cheng's eyes. The hall master of the Martial King Hall frowned and reprimanded. Little brat, stop talking. Qin Feiyang also knew when to stop. If they continued, Ma Cheng would definitely go crazy. King of Yen said, Bring us up first. Qin Feiyang said, To be honest, I've already thought of a plan. Tell me about it. Jiang Jingyi looked at him with good intentions. Lure the snake out of its hole. As long as we make some noise here, Zhuan will definitely come to check it out. At that time, You guys will hold him back while Elder Shi and I will go to save Feng Ling Air. If Xuan doesn't come and only sends Lin Qin, it's fine too. We can capture him and interrogate him about the situation in the cave. As long as we know the situation inside, it won't be difficult to save Senior Feng. Qin Feiyang said. He had been thinking about it for the whole night. This was the most reliable method. Shi Zheng asked. What if he sends the Black Bear King to check it out? It's naturally better if the Black Bear King comes. The reason why he didn't tell me the truth yesterday must be that he was worried that I would be implicated. But now that you guys are here, the situation is different. There's nothing for him to worry about. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The hallmaster of the Martial King Hall pondered for a moment, and looked at Jiang Jingyi and the other two. He said with a smile, I think his idea is feasible. What about you guys? Do you have any objections? No. King of Yin smiled faintly. I have no objections either. Jiang Jingyi said with a smile. He was more and more curious about Qin Feiyang. Only Ma Cheng did not express his opinion. King of Yin patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile. What's there to think about? It's settled. Then, he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Bring us up. The group of people quietly climbed up the mountain. When they arrived at the top of the mountain, Qin Feiyang pointed down and whispered, Xuan is there. The one squatting at the entrance of the cave is the Black Bear King. Their gazes immediately changed. The hallmaster of the Martial King Hall said in a deep voice, Jiang Haoyan, you're the one who made the plan. Hurry up and make the arrangements. We'll listen to you now. Listen to me? Qin Feiyang was stunned and hurriedly said, Thank you, Senior. However, before he could make the arrangements, Ma Cheng suddenly roared. Xuan, come out and face your death. Then, he jumped and landed down, his aura soaring into the sky. Bastard. Chapter 176. The King of Yin, Jiang Jingyi and the Martial King Hall Master changed their expressions as well. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was about to rush down, Jiang Jingyi pulled him back and whispered, Don't be rash. Although Ma Cheng is petty, he won't do anything that will ruin the overall situation. The King of Yin nodded. That's right. He might have a better plan. Let's take 2 steps back, and not let Xuan notice us. The 3 powerhouses and Shi Zheng retreated and held their breaths, waiting for Ma Cheng's attack. Qin Feiyang and Fatso lay in the bushes, glaring at Ma Cheng. Boss, do you believe him? Fatso asked softly. Qin Feiyang did not reply. His gaze was as sharp as an eagle's and was aggressive. Below, the Black Bear King was the first to get up and looked at Ma Cheng in horror. This was an expert. He was no weaker than the person in the cave. The moment Ma Cheng landed, a black figure darted out of the cave. It was a sinister-looking old man in a black robe. His eyes were sunken and emitted a sinister green light. That's right. He was Xuan. Xuan's pupils constricted when he saw Ma Cheng. He said in shock and anger. How did you find this place? Ma Cheng sneered. It's all thanks to Jiang Haoyan. Qin Feiyang, who was lying on the mountaintop, shuddered violently. He turned to look at Theta Wang and the others and said coldly, Is this his plan? Can't you see that he has no intention of saving Feng Cheng and the Black Bear King? The 3 of them frowned as well. At the same time, when he heard Jiang Haoyan's name, Xuan's sinister eyes shone with a cold glint. It's that little bastard again. Where is he? He's up there. Ma Cheng pointed to the mountaintop. Ma Cheng, you've gone too far. The Martial King Hall Master shouted angrily and turned into a streak of light, diving towards Xuan. The King of Yin and Jiang Jingyi exchanged glances and darted towards Xuan as well. They planned to capture the leader first. As long as they could capture Xuan, Feng Cheng and the Black Bear King would not be in danger. At the same time, the Black Bear King also ran towards Ma Cheng. It knew what was going on when it heard Jiang Haoyan's name. However, Xuan was even faster. When he saw that Theta Wang and the Black Bear King was also here, he caught up to the Black Bear King's tea in a single step. The old hand reached out and grabbed the Black Bear King's thigh. His 5 fingers were like steel needles, instantly sinking into the Black Bear King's flesh. He forcefully lifted it. The Black Bear King roared and its huge body fell down, creating a deep crater in the ground. Watching this scene, Qin Feiyang bared his teeth and cracked his eyes. His body was shivering. Originally, the Black Bear King was not far from Ma Cheng. Ma Cheng could save the Black Bear King before Xuan did. He did not help Black Bear, did not help the help bear help. Qin Feiyang's heart was filled with hatred. If it dares to take another step closer, I will crush its head. At this moment, Xuan stepped on the Black Bear King's head and looked at Theta Wang and the Black Bear King with a sinister smile. Lin Chen, bring that old thing out as well. He shouted coldly again without turning his head. Almost at the next moment, Lin Chen dragged an old man with disheveled hair out of the cave. It was Feng Cheng. But at this moment, he was covered in wounds and unconscious. Lin Chen was still quite nervous when he saw the four giants. He hid behind Xuan and did not dare to raise his head. Seeing this, King Yan and the other two frowned. They changed their direction and landed beside Ma Cheng. Jiang Jingyi sighed. Ma Cheng, you shouldn't have done this. Shouldn't have? Ma Cheng was so angry that he laughed. Then I'd like to ask you, why should I listen to the arrangements of a young boy? The Martial King Hall Master said angrily. Don't you know that you have to look at the big picture? Ma Cheng said disdainfully. The big picture? It's ridiculous. With the four of us here, how can he escape? All right, since things have come to this, let's not talk about it anymore. King Yan shouted and looked at Lin Chen gloomily. He said coldly, as a disciple of the Lin family and a core disciple of the Danwang Hall, how can you be in cahoots with the devil Xuan? Are you letting down everyone who has trained you? Lin Chen's face turned pale. Xuan grinned. With me here, don't be afraid of them. Stick out your chest. Sooner or later, you will trample them under your feet. Lin Chen's body trembled slightly. The nervousness in his heart suddenly disappeared. He held his head high and looked directly at the four with a sneer on his face. Jiang Jingyi shouted. Xuan, I advise you to turn back and be saved. Don't be obsessed. Hee. You said the same thing in Yan City back then. But after so many years, I'm still alive and well. I'm not interested in you now. Xuan grinned and looked up at the top of the mountain. He said with a sinister smile, Jiang Haoyan, if you don't want them to die, get down here now. Fatso's eyes trembled. He asked, Boss, what should we do? Qin Feiyang did not hesitate. He stood up and looked at Xuan. Little bastard, you're good. I was fooled by you last time at the Eagle Claw Peak. I was hiding here and you found me again. I can't help but wonder if I owed you something in my previous life. Xuan frowned. This kid was simply his nemesis. Qin Feiyang jumped a few times and landed in the canyon. Fatso followed closely behind him. There would be a fierce battle later. He would only be safe if he stayed by Qin Feiyang's side. Elder Shi also followed beside him. Qin Feiyang did not say a word. He walked step by step towards Xuan. Ma Cheng, who was at the side, pursed his lips and sneered. Silly boy, didn't I ask you to never come back? Why are you so disobedient? The Black Bear King's angry voice resounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked into the Black Bear King's eyes. He smiled and said, You've saved my life a few times. How can I stand by and do nothing? Sigh, you're so silly. The Black Bear King sighed. Fortune favors fools. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked down at Xuan. He said, I don't want to talk nonsense. Let them go and I'll go with you. No. The Martial Lord Hall Master immediately shouted. Qin Feiyang said, This is my personal matter. Please don't interfere. Xuan looked at Qin Feiyang with flickering eyes. There's nothing to think about. I'm more valuable than them. I can help you refine the supreme grade blood spirit pill. I believe it won't be long before you step into the 9-star combat emperor realm, or even higher. Qin Feiyang said expressionlessly. King Yan and the others frowned. Xuan glanced at the four overlords and said, That's a good idea. But aren't you afraid of being hunted down by them? Hunted down? I'll tell you the truth. I've made a plan. If you follow it step by step, you'll definitely die today. But some old bastard wants to take revenge on me. Do you think I still need to be afraid? I hate them more than you do now. I can follow you. If you don't mind, we can join hands. You have the strength and I have the brains. We can turn the county of Yen upside down. Qin Feiyang said coldly. The martial lord hall master's heart sank. The situation had become serious. Ma Cheng was not angry. Instead, the sneer on his face became thicker. Because if Qin Feiyang really reached an agreement with Zuan, he would have every reason to kill Qin Feiyang in front of the martial lord hall master. Zuan looked at Ma Cheng thoughtfully, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Are you that confident?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "At least I'm stronger than that trash Lin Qin." Lin Qin clenched his fists and his eyes were gloomy. Zuan said with a smile, "Compared to Lin Qin, you're indeed much stronger." Haha, suddenly, Zuan laughed out loud. "Little bastard, do you think I don't know what you're planning? You'll definitely hide after I release them. At that time, those 4 old dogs can attack me without any scruples." Zuan looked at him mockingly. Qin Feiyang's heart shuddered. This old fox was not easy to fool. "Little bastard, do you know? I hate you so much that I can't wait to drink your blood and eat your flesh. But after thinking about it, I changed my mind. It's too easy for you to kill you directly. I'll torture you and make you suffer so much that you'll wish you were dead. I'll completely destroy you mentally. You want them very much? All right, I'll give them to you. Anyway, they're no longer of any value." Zuan kicked the Black Bear King's head, and that huge body smashed towards Qin Feiyang with the sound of wind and thunder. At the same time, the Black Bear King let out a blood-curdling scream. The martial lord hall master waved his hand, caught the Black Bear King, and placed him on the ground. Qin Feiyang hurriedly looked over, only to see that the Black Bear King's head had already split open, and blood was gushing out. "Senior Bear King," he roared, squatted in front of the Black Bear King, took out a large pile of healing pills, and stuffed them into the Black Bear King's mouth. Zuan laughed sinisterly and picked up Feng Cheng. Streams of battle qi madly rushed towards Feng Cheng's heart. Ah! The excruciating pain woke Feng Cheng up. Qin Feiyang raised his head abruptly, his eyes widening in anger as he rushed towards Zuan without caring about his own safety. "Jiang Haoyin, calm down." Shizheng hurriedly hugged him and advised anxiously. "Pain. Sorrow. TSK, this is just the beginning. The more painful things are yet to come. One day you'll regret provoking me. You'll kneel in front of me like a dog and beg me to spare you. Haha." Zuan laughed maniacally and threw Feng Cheng in front of Qin Feiyang as if he was throwing rubbish. Following closely, he grabbed Lin Qin and charged into the sky without even looking back. "Where do you think you're going?" The king of Yen and Jiang Jingyi shouted angrily at the same time, carrying a monstrous aura as they chased after him. "Watch him." The martial lord hall master instructed Shizheng, glanced at Ma Cheng gloomily, and quickly chased after him. Chapter 177. However, Qin Feiyang was completely unaware of their departure. "Elder Feng, Senior Bear King, you won't die." He grabbed the highest grade healing pills and stuffed them into the Black Bear King and Feng Cheng's mouths one by one. It was as if as long as they took enough pills, they would be able to live. Fatso watched from the side, and was about to get angry. The Bear King's head was broken. Feng Cheng's heart was broken. It was obvious that there was no hope. He wanted to comfort him, but he didn't know how to say it. Shizheng also lowered his head in silence. He didn't expect that this seemingly strong young man would have such a weak side. Suddenly, Feng Cheng stretched out his old hand and grabbed Qin Feiyang's wrist, laughing intermittently. "Brat, I didn't expect to see you again before I die." As he spoke, he vomited blood. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, "Elder Feng, don't talk. If you don't say it now, you won't have the chance. Brat, promise me a request. Linger's parents died early. Since we were young, we relied on each other for survival. The one I can't let go of the most is her. When I die, help me take care of her, okay?" Feng Cheng looked at him pleadingly. "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded, suppressing the emotions in his heart. He turned to look at Shizheng and smiled. "Elder Shi, can you leave me for a while? I have something to say to Elder Feng." "Okay." Shizheng turned and walked outside. Qin Feiyang turned back to look at Feng Cheng, only to find that Feng Cheng had already closed his eyes. His heartbeat and breathing had also stopped. He originally wanted to tell Feng Cheng his true identity, but now there was no chance. I also have something to ask of you. At this time, the Black Bear King's voice entered his mind. Senior, no matter what it is, I promise. Qin Feiyang raised his head and nodded with a forced smile on his face. Do you see that mound? My child is buried there. I hope you can bury me next to it. Let me continue to protect it. Zuan didn't find the treasure vault. You can take everything in there as well. As the Black Bear King spoke, 2 drops of blood flowed down from the corners of his eyes. It was filled with endless sorrow. After saying this, its aura of life also stopped. Boom. Qin Feiyang was like a bolt from the blue. The black bear cub is dead? It turned out that the mound was its grave. It had only been a few months, so why did it become like this? Why, suddenly, he raised his head and roared. Meanwhile, rumble, crack. In the distance, a series of loud noises came, shaking the heavens and the earth. Terrifying shockwaves from the battle spread rapidly. They're fighting. Fatso and Shizheng looked at the sky in surprise. But Qin Feiyang didn't look at him, looking indifferent. He got up and walked to the side of the mound. True qi gushed out from the soles of his feet, and with a boom, a deep pit suddenly appeared. After burying the Black Bear Queen, he bowed deeply 3 times before the grave. There weren't any bold words. Everything seemed plain and simple. After that, he walked into the cave alone and saw many corpses. It was too horrible to look at. But there was no change in his expression. He entered the treasury, took everything, and left the cave. He carried Elderfang's body and walked out of the canyon. Shizheng hurriedly asked, Jiang Haotian, where are you going? Qin Feiyang said, Black Bear City. Fatso chased after him and asked, Boss, don't you want to see what happened to Zhuoren? Not interested. Qin Feiyang whispered. He looked up at the sky, and 2 rays of light shot out. Because he won't die. Won't die. Fatso and Shizheng looked at each other, with a trace of surprise in their eyes. For giants working together, how could they not be able to deal with Zhuoren? Qin Feiyang explained and left the canyon silently. Black Bear City. Isn't he Jiang Haotian? I heard he went to Yen City. Why did he suddenly come back? Look, isn't the person he's carrying the Pill Hall's Elderfang? That's right, it's him. I heard that he was kidnapped by Zhuoren a few months ago. Why is he dead now? As soon as Qin Feiyang entered Black Bear City, the people on the street surrounded him. But with Shizheng around, no one could get close. Qin Feiyang went straight to the Pill Hall, but he did not go in. He stood outside the door. After a while, 2 familiar figures entered his line of sight. They were Luo Xiong and Elder Emo. What's going on? Jiang Haotian, how did Elder Feng die? The 2 hurriedly ran to Qin Feiyang and asked with a sad face. Qin Feiyang did not explain. After passing Elder Feng to Luo Xiong, he said, Seniors, please bury him. Okay. The 2 nodded. They had a lot of questions to ask. But Qin Feiyang did not give them the chance to ask. He took out a jade box and stuffed it into Elder Mo's hand. After saying goodbye, he left with Shizheng and Fatso. Elder Emo opened the jade box and his eyes trembled. There were 4 supreme grade red fire-glazed elixirs inside. The elixir patterns were dazzling. Where's Brother Jiang? Where is he? Not long after, Jiang Wei hurriedly ran over and asked Luo Xiong and Elder Emo. He's gone. Luo Xiong sighed deeply and left with Elder Emo. The 2 of them looked very lonely. They had heard about the situation in Yen City. If it wasn't for those people from the Danwang Hall, how would it end up like this? Outside the city, Qin Feiyang followed a small path and entered a forest. He took out 3 illusory form elixirs. He took one and gave the other 2 to Fatso and Shizheng. The 2 of them looked at each other and took the elixirs suspiciously. Fatso was puzzled. Boss, is there a need to change your appearance now? Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, You can't let your guard down. After changing your appearance, go to Black Bear City and wait for me. I want to go somewhere. Shizheng raised his eyebrows and said, No, I can't let you leave alone. I'm just going to a small village. I'll be fine. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he gave Fatso a look. Fatso understood and pounced on Shizheng, hugging him tightly. At the same time, Qin Feiyang turned and quickly disappeared into the forest, disappearing from Shizheng's sight. Shizheng was shocked and said angrily, "Fatso, what are you doing? Let go of me. Unless you kill Fat Lord." Fatso refused to let go and sighed. "Elder Shi, Fat Lord knows that you are concerned about Jiang Laoda, but I am more concerned about his safety than you are. Don't worry, he will be fine." Shizheng frowned and said in a deep voice, "If anything happens to him, will you be responsible?" "If I'm responsible, I'll be responsible. Let's go to Spring Breeze restaurant to drink and get drunk." After Fatso consumed the illusory form elixir, he dragged Shizheng towards Black Bear City. In front of a fast-flowing river, Qin Feiyang turned his head and glanced at the forest behind him. Seeing that Shizheng did not chase after him, he finally let out a long sigh. The place he was going to now was Iron Ox Town. So, he definitely could not let Shizheng follow him. The current him was no longer the same as before. In less than half a day, they arrived at Iron Ox Town. Entering the town with an unfamiliar face would definitely arouse suspicion. After all, Iron Ox Town was not big, and there were not many people. Everyone knew each other. "I say, young man, where did you come from? What business do you have in our Iron Ox Town?" A few old men who were playing chess under a big tree stopped Qin Feiyang and asked curiously. Qin Feiyang just smiled at them and walked past them. What a strange kid. The old men shook their heads and did not pay much attention to him. Lin family. Qin Feiyang stood in front of the gate, looked at the two servants, and said indifferently, "Take me to see Lin Chong." "Who are you? Is the patriarch someone you can see whenever you want? Tell me your name." The two servants shouted coldly. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly and directly rushed in. "How dare you? Coming to my Lin family to behave atrociously, see if I don't break your dog legs." The two servants were full of hostility, waving their fists and punching towards Qin Feiyang. "Humph!" Qin Feiyang snorted and turned around to slap them. Slap! The two servants were slapped away on the spot. A bright red palm print quickly appeared on their faces, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of their mouths. "If you dare to block my way again, I'll kill you." After coldly leaving behind these words, Qin Feiyang strode into the Lin clan. He was no stranger to the Lin family. He walked to the meeting hall with ease. The servants he met along the way were a little confused. Who was this master? After passing through a garden, he found Lin Chong sitting alone in a pavilion, drinking wine. His clothes were disheveled, his hair was disheveled, and his face was dirty. He looked like an old man with one foot in the grave. Qin Feiyang walked behind the two servants and asked, "What's wrong with Lin Chong?" "Sigh, it's all because of Mississippi. Ever since Miss went to Yen City, the patriarch has been like this, drinking all day and doing nothing. If this goes on, the Lin family will decline sooner or later." The two servants sighed. After that, they found that something was wrong. They turned to Qin Feiyang and scolded. "Who are you? What are you doing in our Lin family?" "I'm here to find your patriarch," Qin Feiyang said lightly and strode toward the pavilion. The two servants looked at each other and hurriedly chased after him. With Qin Feiyang's current speed, how could the two servants catch up with him? He walked into the pavilion. Immediately, the smell of wine and stench mixed together, forming a stench that assailed his nose. He frowned, looked at the drunk Lin Chong, and shook his head. "I didn't expect you to become like this in less than a year. Who are you? Are you here to drink with me?" Lin Chong stood up drunkenly and staggered toward Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and stood aside. With a bang, Lin Chong lost his balance and fell to the ground. The two servants ran over and hurriedly helped him up. Smelling the stench, disgust filled the faces of the two men. Qin Feiyang shook his head. "As the patriarch of the Lin family, you even began to hate the servants. How can you be such a failure? I don't need your help. Get out of my way." Chapter 178. Get out. Qin Feiyang snorted, looked at the two maids and asked, "Where is the pond?" One of the maids said, "There is one in the backyard. Why are you looking for the pond?" "Take me there." Qin Feiyang stretched out his big hand and picked Lin Chang up as if he was picking up a chick. The two maids were hesitant, because they guessed what Qin Feiyang wanted to do. Qin Feiyang shouted, "If you don't want to die, lead the way quickly." The two maids shuddered and quickly ran to the backyard. Dong. In front of the pond, Qin Feiyang directly threw Lin Chang in without saying a word. Help! At that moment, in the water, Lin Chang began to struggle madly. He kept calling for help. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He turned to look at the two maids and asked, "He can't swim." The two maids nodded, leaned together, and shrank their bodies. Their small faces were pale. Who dared to throw the patriarch into the pond? Who was this person? Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Then why don't you call someone to save him? I won't be responsible if he drowns." "Come on. The patriarch is drowning." The two maids immediately shouted. Almost at the next moment, in a nearby attic, a servant ran out. When he came to the pond, he saw Lin Chang's situation and hurriedly jumped in. It took him a lot of effort to save Lin Chang. The servant took a few breaths, glared at the two maids and shouted, "What's the matter with you? If anything happens to the patriarch, can you bear the responsibility? It has nothing to do with us. It was he who threw the patriarch in." The two maids pointed to Qin Feiyang. The servant looked at Qin Feiyang and shouted, "You dare to murder the patriarch, are you looking for death? Get out." Qin Feiyang spat out this word coldly. "What did you say? I dare you to say that again." That servant's eyes widened in anger, full of hostility. "Scram," Qin Feiyang said. "You're courting death." The servant let out a low growl and pounced at Qin Feiyang. "Stop." But at this moment, a low shout came from behind. "Patriarch." The servant was overjoyed and quickly turned around to look. Lin Chang got up from the ground and shook his head hard to get rid of the last trace of drunkenness. Then he looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. That servant ran to Lin Chang's side and sternly said, "Master, he was the one who threw you into the pond. He must have eaten a leopard's guts." Lin Chang let out a long breath and walked in front of Qin Feiyang. He sneered and said, "Do you know why this patriarch asked him to stop?" Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "I'm not interested." "Even if you're not interested, you still have to listen. It's because this patriarch wants to personally blow your head off." Lin Chang laughed sinisterly. True qi surged as he punched towards Qin Feiyang. "You don't have this ability now." Qin Feiyang stretched out his arm and easily caught Lin Chang's fist. "How is this possible?" Lin Chang was shocked. He used all his strength, but couldn't pull his hand out. That servant was also dumbfounded. This person was actually so strong? Even the patriarch could be easily subdued. Fortunately, before he didn't really rush up. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Lin Chang was shocked and angry. "Who the hell are you?" Qin Feiyang let go of his hand and said lightly, "I want to talk to you alone." Lin Chang shook his hand and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. He waved his hand and said, "All of you retreat." That servant and two servant girls, as if they had been pardoned, disappeared in a few blinks of an eye. Lin Chang said, "Say it now." Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "Your current appearance is really embarrassing. But this is what you asked for. No one will sympathize with you." "Is this what you want to say?" Lin Chang clenched his fists. His eyes flashed fiercely. Qin Feiyang said, "I don't have so much time to care about your affairs. I'm just thinking that if Lin Yi knows that you have become like this, she should be very sad." Lin Chang's gaze trembled. He stepped forward and grabbed Qin Feiyang's clothes. He roared with a ferocious face. "How do you know, Yi? Who the hell are you?" Qin Feiyang didn't speak. He just looked at him faintly. After a while, Lin Chang reacted. He hurriedly let go of his hand and bowed. "Sir, I'm sorry. I offended you." Qin Feiyang said, "If I give you another chance, will you still deal with Qin Feiyang?" Lin Chang's body shook. He said in surprise, "You know Qin Feiyang? Answer me." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Lin Chang lowered his head. His hands were clenched together. His face was distorted and looked ferocious. He hated Qin Feiyang from the bottom of his heart. It was because Qin Feiyang killed Lin Bailey that Lin Han was enraged. He snatched Yi and forced him to sign the agreement to sever the father-daughter relationship. So in his view, all of this was caused by Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang looked disappointed and shook his head. It has been so long, but you are still stubborn. You are hopeless. People like you really shouldn't be sympathized. Who do you think you are? Do you know what Qin Feiyang did to me? How much do you know about Qin Feiyang? What right do you have to criticize me here? Lin Chen roared with all his might. I don't want to argue with you. Just pretend that I didn't come this time. Qin Feiyang said lightly, then turned and left. Lin Chong stared at Qin Feiyang's back angrily. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and his body trembled. He hurriedly said, Are you Qin Feiyang? That's right. Go and tell Lin Han. This is a good opportunity. He should reward you with some benefits. No. It shouldn't be a reward. It should be alms. Qin Feiyang said sarcastically without turning his head. He is really Qin Feiyang. Lin Chong felt very uncomfortable and incredulous. In less than a year, he had become so strong. Was he still the trash from before? Seeing that Qin Feiyang was about to leave his sight, he suddenly shivered and shouted, Wait! Qin Feiyang didn't stop and left the Lin family. Why did he suddenly appear? What does he want to do? Revenge? It doesn't seem like it. If it's revenge, now is the best opportunity. Lin Chong muttered to himself. He really couldn't figure out the purpose of Qin Feiyang's return. Suddenly, a sharp light flashed. He hurriedly ran into a secret room, walked to the image crystal, and put his hand on it. But he immediately withdrew his hand. There was a struggle on his face. Should he report to Lin Han? After repeating this for a while, he made up his mind, turned around and ran out of the secret room. He hurriedly came to the door, looked at the two servants and asked, Where is that person just now? Which direction did he go? Patriarch, you're finally awake. The two servants were very excited. Lin Chong said angrily. I asked you a question, didn't you hear it? The two of them were stunned and soon knew who Lin Chong was talking about. Because in the whole day, only one person had come to the Lin family, and that was the person who slapped them. He seems to have gone in the direction of the treasure pavilion. Patriarch, did he do something to you? Don't worry, I'll go gather everyone now and find him to settle the score. The two servants' faces were filled with hostility. Slap. But what they didn't expect was that Lin Chong actually slapped them in the ear. Stay here obediently. If you dare to touch him, I'll kill you first. Before the two of them could react, Lin Chong left a ruthless sentence and ran in the direction of the treasure pavilion. We're going to help him vent his anger, but he actually hit us? Is he crazy? The two of them looked aggrieved and puzzled. Treasure pavilion. Reception room. A dignified and beautiful woman sat by the tea table, sizing up the person opposite her. The woman was Luo Qianxue. As for the person opposite her, it was naturally Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Senior, you still don't recognize me? I don't recognize you. Luo Qianxue shook her head, her face full of suspicion. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Now that he had changed his appearance and let Luo Qianxue guess, it was a bit too much for her. He smiled and said, Senior, I'm Qin Feiyang. What? Luo Qianxue suddenly stood up and said in surprise, Is it really you? It's really me. Qin Feiyang nodded. Seeing the beautiful woman in front of him again, he felt a sense of familiarity that he hadn't felt for a long time. He felt very at ease. Luo Qianxue walked up and knocked on Qin Feiyang's head. She said angrily, Brat, you're back. Why do you still need me to guess? Qin Feiyang rubbed his head, looking charmingly naive. Come, sit here. Luo Qianxue shook her head and laughed. She pulled Qin Feiyang to the chair next to her. Qin Feiyang didn't sit down, and let Luo Qianxue sit down first. Then, he bowed to Luo Qianxue and said solemnly, Senior, thank you for lending me a hand when I was in danger. I can't thank you enough. Luo Qianxue smiled and said, It's just a small matter. Don't call me Senior. You're not weak now. If you don't mind, just call me Aunt Shui. Aunt Shui? Qin Feiyang was stunned. There was an inexplicable throbbing in his heart. He nodded and said, Feiyang can't wait. Why would I mind? Luo Qianxue made tea and sighed. Your life this year is really exciting. Qin Feiyang asked. Aunt Shui, you mean? Luo Qianxue said. Qingzhu has already told me about your deeds through the image crystal. It's been hard on you to experience so much at such a young age. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Without pressure, I won't grow. This is what Uncle Yuan taught me. It only took 5 years to teach such a promising child. Qin Yuan is really great. Luo Qianxue shook her head and sighed. She poured a cup of tea and placed it in front of Qin Feiyang. She asked, Why did you come back this time? Qin Feiyang picked up the teacup, took a sip, and nodded. There are indeed some things, but I didn't do it. But it doesn't matter. The situation I set in Yen City should be enough for me to reverse the situation. He came to Iron Ox Town for Lin Chong. Because Lin Chong was clear about the conflict between him and Lin Bailey. If Lin Chong helped to speak, then Lin Han couldn't find any excuse to refute him. More importantly, it was not a simple matter to let the royal family cancel the wedding of Lin Yi and the eldest prince. But if Lin Chong was present, the effect would be different. After all, Lin Chong was Lin Yi's biological father no matter what. An agreement couldn't be broken. Unfortunately, until now Lin Chong still didn't repent. Chapter 179. Plot. Luo Qianxue was also very surprised. A young man who was not even 16 years old dared to plot in Yen City. This kind of mentality was really shocking. After a moment of silence, Luo Qianxue asked, Do you want to restore your real identity? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I can't use the name Jiang Haoyan for the rest of my life. That's true. Luo Qianxue nodded, thought for a moment and asked, When do you plan to show your cards? Qin Feiyang said, 9 days later, and the first prince's wedding ceremony. Hearing this, Luo Qianxue's intelligent eyes flashed with a strange light. Knock knock. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Luo Qianxue asked, Who is it? Pavilion Master. Master Lin wants to see you. A woman's voice came from outside. Do you want to hide? Luo Qianxue frowned and looked at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, No, because he came to see me. See you? Luo Qianxue's face showed a trace of suspicion, and she said to the people outside the door, Let him in. The door was pushed open, and a young woman stood at the door. When the young woman stepped aside, Lin Chong entered their sight. After seeing Qin Feiyang, he was happy and hurried in. Close the door. Without my permission, no one is allowed to enter the reception room. Luo Qianxue ordered the young woman. Yes. The woman answered, closed the door and left. Lin Chong walked to Qin Feiyang, cupped his hands and said, Qin Feiyang in the past. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about the past. Just tell me your purpose. Lin Chong wanted to say something, but he swallowed it back and looked at Luo Qianxue. Qin Feiyang said, It's okay. Aunt Shui is not an outsider. Just say it. Aunt Shui? Lin Chong was shocked. When did Qin Feiyang become Luo Qianxue's nephew? Qin Feiyang frowned. Is there anything wrong? If there's nothing important, don't waste my time. Lin Chong said, I want to ask you to help me save Yi. Weren't you the one who insisted on sending her to the royal family? Why do you want to save them now? Moreover, the one who's going to marry her is the first prince, the future county king of the county of Yen. I'm just a nobody. How would I dare to go against the royal family? Qin Feiyang sneered. Yes. In the past, I was blinded by desire and didn't think about Yi's feelings. But ever since Yi left, my heart has become very uncomfortable. I have reflected again and again, regretted it again and again. But what can I do? In front of Lin Han, I'm just an insignificant wretch. I can only use alcohol to numb myself every day. I thought that I might spend the rest of my life like this. But your appearance gave me hope. Lin Chong said guiltily. Don't make it sound so pompous. You drank because Lin Han took Yi away from you. He took away the power that belonged to you. You're begging me now because you're not convinced and don't want Lin Han to succeed. Am I right? Qin Feiyang mocked. Lin Chang's face became extremely ugly, because Qin Feiyang's words were all his inner thoughts. It was tantamount to stripping him naked and exposing him in front of others without any reservation. Lin Chang, you may not know Qin Feiyang's current status in Yan City. Let me tell you this. Every decision he makes now can cause a big storm in Yan City. Luo Qianxue said faintly. In the beginning, in order to stop Lin Yi and Qin Feiyang from being together, this person could be said to be unscrupulous. How could he have thought that the trash back then would have today's achievements? Perhaps when he learned the truth, even his intestines would turn green with regret. Hearing this, Lin Chang's face was full of disbelief. Even if Qin Feiyang's strength had become stronger now, it was impossible for him to become an important figure in a place like Yan City. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said, "Go back, I can't help you with this matter." "Feiyang, I really know I was wrong. I was going to report to Lin Han just now, but I finally figured it out. Just help me. Even if you don't give me face, at least for Yi's sake. You don't want to see her marry into the royal family and be depressed for the rest of her life." Lin Chang begged. "You still know that she will be depressed?" Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up and said angrily, "What were you doing at that time? You only know regret now. Are you worthy of being Yi's father? Have you ever considered for her?" Lin Chang couldn't find anything to say for a while. "I'll kneel for you, okay?" In the end, he gritted his teeth, bent his knees, and knelt on the ground. Seeing this, Luo Qianxue stepped forward and grabbed Lin Chang's shoulder. She turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said meaningfully, "After all, he is Yi's biological father." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. It seemed that Luo Qianxue and he had thought of the same thing. "Okay, I'll give Aunt Shui face." After a moment of silence, Qin Feiyang nodded, took out an illusory form pill, threw it to Lin Chang, and said lightly, "Go back and arrange it immediately. Follow me to Yan City later." "This is a supreme grade pill." Luo Qianxue's eyes lit up. "What? A supreme grade pill?" Lin Chang was shocked and hurriedly looked at the illusory form pill. When he saw the bright pill pattern, his eyeballs almost popped out. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Hurry up and arrange it before I regret it." Okay. Lin Chang nodded repeatedly and turned to leave quickly. About half an hour passed. Lin Chang came again. Qin Feiyang also said goodbye to Luo Qianxue and rushed to Black Bear City with Lin Chang. But before leaving, he gave Luo Qianxue a supreme-grade red fire-colored glass pill. In this way, his original supreme-grade red fire-colored glass pills were all gone. Only the first prince's 10 pills were left. When they arrived at Black Bear City, it was already late at night. After calling Fatso and Shizheng, they rushed back to Yan City overnight. Calm Heart Lake. Qin Feiyang sat in front of the tea table, looked at Lin Chang and said, "Before Yi gets married, you'd better not leave Calm Heart Lake. Otherwise, if anything happens, I won't be responsible." Lin Chang nodded. His heart was in disbelief. Luo Qianxue said that Qin Feiyang's status in Yan City was not ordinary, but he didn't believe it. But on the way here, he finally deeply understood. The 9-star Battle King's personal protection. The martial imperial palace treated him as a distinguished guest. This kind of treatment was really amazing. Qin Feiyang said again. "Lu Hong, take him up and arrange a room for him." "Follow me." Lu Hong glanced at Lin Chang, turned and walked to the second floor. Zing. Lu Hong went downstairs again, frowning. "Who is he?" Qin Feiyang said, "Yi's father." Lu Hong and Fatso looked at each other, a trace of doubt in their eyes. "Don't ask about this, help me count the things in this Qianquan bag." Qin Feiyang took out a Qianquan bag and put it on the tea table. Inside was the Black Bear King's treasure. Fatso sighed secretly, suddenly grinned, took out a big red flower and said, "Boss, look at what this is." 9 Suns flower? Qin Feiyang turned his head and looked, and said in a daze, "Where did it come from?" "You forgot it so quickly?" Fatso rolled his eyes and said, "It's the one in the canyon. When Shizheng and I were drinking at Spring Breeze restaurant, we suddenly remembered that we had forgotten to pick it, so we ran back to pick it." Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead, feeling rather annoyed. At that time, he had completely thrown the 9 Suns flower to the back of his mind. Fortunately, Fatso remembered, otherwise he would have to make another trip. Thank you, Qin Feiyang said with a smile as he took the 9 suns flower. His eyes flickered with radiance. He looked at Fatso and asked, "Did you see Zwan and the others when you went back?" Fatso shook his head and said, "They were long gone. By the way, should we tell Feng Ling heir about Feng Cheng's death?" Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment and said, "I'll tell her later. Let's contact Manager Li first." Fatso took out an image crystal, and his genuine qi surged. Manager Li's image quickly appeared. Manager Li said in surprise, "You're already back? Isn't it obvious?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Has Zwan been killed?" Manager Li asked. "I don't know." Qin Feiyang shook his head. He was not in the mood to ask. He asked, "How's the collection of medicinal herbs?" Manager Li said, "The Lin family has a snow crystal, and the royal family has a 9 suns flower, but they don't intend to sell it." "Why?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Manager Li said, "They said they want to use it as a prize for the competition. You should know about the competition organized by the royal family, right?" Qin Feiyang nodded. The first prize is a 9 suns flower, the second prize is a snow crystal, and the third prize is a leaf of the red glaze tree. Manager Li smiled. "The rewards are so generous?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. These 3 medicinal herbs were rare. The royal family and the Lin family were really generous. Manager Li joked, "Brat, you're so smart. Can't you see that the royal family is actually trying to lure you to participate? They're targeting you." "Lure me?" Qin Feiyang frowned. He really couldn't figure it out. Manager Li said, "According to reliable sources, the first prince is the one who arranged the prizes. Do you understand now?" "So that's how it is." Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. He pursed his lips and sneered. Fatso and Zwan had humiliated the first prince last time. They must have held a grudge against him. The first prince was a smart person. He knew that Zwan would not participate in such a boring competition. So he used these 3 precious medicinal herbs as bait to force Zwan to participate. His purpose was to defeat Zwan, humiliate him, and embarrass him in front of everyone in Yen City. Manager Li said playfully, "So are you going to participate or not?" Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "I was worried that I couldn't find a suitable wedding gift. I didn't expect him to deliver it to me. Do you think I should go or not?" "We won't be polite to people who are looking for trouble," Fatso said with a smirk. Interesting, interesting. Manager Li couldn't help but laugh. Qin Feiyang said, "Senior, I'll have to trouble you to send the medicinal herbs over now. Then you must prepare the gold coins. This is not a small sum." Chapter 180. The First Prince. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and pondered for a while before asking, "Do you know the cultivation of the first prince?" "We don't know." Fatso and Li Mu shook their heads. Qin Feiyang got up and said, "I'll go to the cultivation hall. When Steward Li comes, you can ask him about the rules of the competition. The more detailed, the better." Lu Hong frowned and said, "You've come back in a hurry. Go and have a rest first. I'll talk to Feng Ling heir." Fatso nodded. It could be seen that although Qin Feiyang looked strong, he was actually very tired. They really wanted to share some of the burden with Qin Feiyang. "It's okay. You've done me a great favor by counting the Qiankuan bag." Qin Feiyang smiled, turned around, walked out of the attic, and went straight to the cultivation hall. 2 deacon elders were guarding here. One of them asked in confusion, "What are you doing here?" Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, "I want to see Feng Ling heir." "I guess that you're looking for Feng Ling heir. She's in the number 1 cultivation room. Go in by yourself. Remember to be reserved." The 2 of them said with a smile, which was very ambiguous. Reserved? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Did they forget that he was still a minor? But he didn't explain. He cupped his hands to the 2 of them and walked into the cultivation hall. In front of the number 1 cultivation room, Qin Feiyang looked at the stone door and didn't knock for a long time, because he could imagine how sad Feng Ling heir would be when she learned of Feng Cheng's death. Knock knock. In the end, he let out a long breath and reached out to gently knock on the door. But after waiting for a long time, Feng Ling Air didn't open the door. She's not here? Qin Feiyang frowned. Just as he was about to turn and leave, the stone door slowly opened and a pale face entered Qin Feiyang's line of sight. Qin Feiyang looked at Feng Ling Air. There were tear stains on her cheeks, and her eyes were red and swollen. She looked rather haggard. It was obvious that she had just cried. A trace of doubt crept onto his face as he asked, "What's wrong with you?" "What's the matter?" Feng Ling Air asked a question instead of answering. Her voice was a little hoarse. Qin Feiyang swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. "If there's nothing else, then leave. I'm not in the mood to entertain you right now." After Feng Ling Air finished speaking, she reached out and closed the stone door. What needs to be said must be said. Qin Feiyang sighed inwardly. He reached out his hand and pressed on the stone door. He looked at Feng Ling Air and said, "Your grandfather." Immediately, Feng Ling Air's body trembled. "What is it?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and asked, "You already know?" "Yes. It was Elder Ji who told me personally." Feng Ling Air nodded. Tears streamed down her face. Qin Feiyang said in surprise, "How did she know? Could it be that the palace master has returned?" "I don't know anything. I just want to be alone." Feng Ling Air shook her head. With a bang, she slammed the door shut. The sound of sobbing could be heard vaguely. Qin Feiyang stood in front of the door. He was at a loss. "Haotian, in the entire martial imperial palace, you have the best relationship with Ling. You should comfort her." Suddenly, the voice of an old man echoed from behind. Qin Feiyang was startled. He turned his head and saw Elder One standing behind him. His old face was full of worry. Qin Feiyang said angrily, "Senior, can't you make some noise when you walk?" Elder One smiled, but it was very stiff. Qin Feiyang asked, "Is the palace master back?" "He's on his way back. By the way, let me tell you a piece of bad news. Zuan escaped." Elder One said, "This should be good news." Qin Feiyang pursed his lips and sneered. Elder One frowned and said unhappily, "What are you talking about?" "The truth. With a villain like Ma Cheng, it's hard not to fail. By the way, did you tell Feng Ling Air the real cause of Feng Cheng's death?" Qin Feiyang asked. "No. She's very sad now and she's still so young. We don't want her to bear too much." "Don't tell her either. In addition, the palace master has reached an agreement with Ma Cheng. The Danwang Hall will no longer target you. But in advance, you can't spread what Ma Cheng did in the Black Bear Mountain. Especially that fatso. Tell him to keep his mouth shut." Feng Cheng said with a serious face. Since he dared to do it, why would he be afraid of others talking about it? Qin Feiyang said angrily. After all, he is the palace master of the Danwang Hall. His reputation is very important. Our palace master, King Yan, and pavilion master Jiang also have to think about the overall situation. In such a complicated environment, many things can't be done as you want. Elder Feng Cheng's face was also full of helplessness. Qin Feiyang said self-deprecatingly, "The death of Feng Cheng and the Black Bear King in exchange for our peace. This is really a good deal." "Alas." Elder One sighed softly, patted him on the shoulder, and comforted him. "The dead can't be brought back to life. Don't be too sad. Live well in the present." After saying that, Elder One turned and left. He came here to comfort Feng Ling Air. But now, it seemed that he didn't need to comfort her. "Ma Cheng." Qin Feiyang clenched his hands tightly, and his eyes became aggressive. Although he couldn't do anything to Ma Cheng now, he would slowly collect interest. He turned to look at the cultivation room, and was about to leave. But at this moment, Feng Ling Air opened the stone door, and walked out of the cultivation room. She said indifferently, "Follow me." Qin Feiyang followed silently. Since he had promised Feng Cheng, he naturally had to do it. It turned out that Feng Ling Air was going to drown her sorrows in alcohol. Drinking until midnight, she was already drunk to the point of unconsciousness. Qin Feiyang carried her back to the Jingxin Lake. Fatso and the other two immediately went up to greet him. Arriving at the second floor, Qin Feiyang walked into a room and placed Feng Ling Air on the bed. Then, he got up and looked at Lu Hong smiling. Go get a basin of water to wipe her, and then change her into a clean set of clothes. During this period of time, you don't have to do anything. You are responsible for accompanying her. Go out more often and talk. Okay. Lu Hong nodded. Thank you for your hard work. Qin Feiyang smiled and said to Fatso, come down with me. The two of them quickly went downstairs and sat beside the coffee table. Qin Feiyang asked, where are the medicinal herbs? Fatso took out 2 Qiankuan bag and said excitedly, do you know what Fat Lord found in the Black Bear King's treasure? 2 red glass trees, a total of 6 leaves, 7 fire ginseng, 2 blood ginseng, 1 9 suns flower, and 1 snow crystal. What? Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. There were actually such precious medicinal herbs? Fatso said. Other than these, there are many other precious medicinal herbs. As for gold coins, there aren't many, only 1 million. Qin Feiyang laughed. With those medicinal herbs, would we still lack gold coins? He was very grateful to the Black Bear King. But at the same time, he blamed himself even more. If he hadn't informed King Yen and the others, how could the Black Bear King have died? Fatso frowned and said angrily, Boss, don't take all the responsibility on yourself. This is increasing the pressure on yourself. If you want to blame someone, blame that old bastard Ma Cheng. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile, I'm fine. Fatso sighed and said with a smile, Fat Lord has sorted it out. We have already gathered 3 sets of medicinal herbs for the potential elixir, and 6 sets of medicinal herbs for the red glass elixir. They are all in this Qiankuan bag. Fatso pointed to the Qiankuan bag on the left. 3 sets. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed. He turned to look at Fatso, his eyes flickering. Fatso touched his nose and chuckled. Why are you looking at Fat Lord like that? Are you also mesmerized by Fat Lord's handsomeness? At that moment, Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said with a smile, I might as well give all the medicinal herbs and gold coins to you for safekeeping. Fatso was slightly stunned and said with a sneaky smile, Aren't you afraid that Fat Lord will fill his pockets? Qin Feiyang said lightly, It doesn't matter. Anyway, when the time comes, I will ask you for the medicinal herbs. You want to be a hands-off shopkeeper. Fatty had a helpless expression on his face. To be honest, it is not safe to leave the medicinal herbs and gold coins with Fat Lord. What if Fat Lord is robbed? So we have to separate them. The medicinal herbs will be with Fat Lord, and the gold coins will be with Lu Hong. Boss, what do you think? Fatso asked. Qin Feiyang laughed. You have considered it quite thoroughly. You guys do as you see fit. I will go and refine the potential pill first. Give me the Qiankuan bag after you have sorted it out. Remember to leave me some pocket money. In your dreams, Fat Lord won't leave you a single silver coin. Fatso laughed sinisterly. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him, grabbed the Qiankuan bag on the left, and prepared to enter the castle. Boss, wait, what should we do with this? Fatso hurriedly called out to him and took out a piece of paper. Qin Feiyang took a look and his face immediately darkened. This was an IOU. It was written that Qin Feiyang owed Treasure Pavilion 30 million gold coins. If he did not pay it off within a month, he would receive 1,000 gold coins interest every day. 30 million? Where are we going to find it? Damn it. Why doesn't that old bastard managerly rob us? Fatso's face was filled with anger and a headache. Qin Feiyang asked, How many gold coins do we have now? Fatso said, More than 4 million. Only 4 million. It's really a drop in the bucket. When I refine the scarlet fire-colored glass pill, I will use it to pay off the debt. Qin Feiyang threw the IOU to Fatso and disappeared without a trace. Not long after, Lu Hong went downstairs. Fatso asked, How is she? Asleep. Lu Hong smiled and asked, What were you guys talking about downstairs just now? Fatso said, Boss said that from now on, Fat Lord will be in charge of medicinal herbs, and you will be in charge of gold coins. In other words, Fat Lord will be in charge of resources, and you will be in charge of finances. Lu Hong laughed. This is a good thing, it means that he trusts us a lot. So, you have to do a good job and not let boss down. How about we go on a date and have a candlelit dinner to celebrate? Fatso stared at her lecherously. Lu Hong's face immediately turned cold. Fatso shrunk his neck and hurriedly ran away. At the same time, in a certain hall of the palace, Lin Hao frowned. Your Highness, the elimination round will begin tomorrow. Jiang Haoyan still hasn't come to register. Do you think he will come to participate in the competition? The eldest prince said. If I knew, would I still be here worrying? Lin Hao said. Let's increase the reward. The eldest prince's eyes lit up. This was a good idea. All right. Tomorrow morning you will announce it. The prize for first place is a 9 suns flower and a snow crystal. The prize for second place is 3 leaves of the scarlet fire-colored glass tree. The prize for third place is a fire ginseng. I don't believe that I can't lure him out. Chapter 181. At dawn, Qin Feiyang walked out of the castle and pushed the door open. He saw that Feng Ling had woken up and was standing alone by the lake, looking at the clear water in a daze. Lu Hong was accompanying her. Qin Feiyang walked over and apologized. I'm sorry, I'm incompetent. I couldn't save your grandfather. Feng Ling said. This has nothing to do with you. You don't have to blame yourself. Qin Feiyang's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Boss, you're so early. Fatso's voice came from the other side of the lake. Qin Feiyang looked up and saw Fatso standing on the other side of the wooden bridge, waving at him. You're even earlier. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Of course, haven't you heard? The early bird gets the worm. Fatso chuckled and quickly ran over saying, Boss, Fat Lord really heard a strange news. What news? Qin Feiyang and Lu Hong looked at him suspiciously. The prize of the competition has suddenly doubled. Fatso explained in detail. After listening, Qin Feiyang sneered. This eldest prince is really impatient. Feng Ling turned to look at him and frowned. Are you going to participate in the competition? Qin Feiyang said. With such a tempting prize in front of me, how can I not go? Feng Ling thought for a moment and said, Then I'll go too. I have nothing to do anyway. No. Fatso shook his head. Why not? Feng Ling asked. Qin Feiyang was also puzzled. Fatso said. According to the rules of this competition, only those under the age of 18 can participate. If Fat Lord remembers correctly, you should be 18 years old. Feng Ling frowned and said. Why did they set this rule? That's what the first prince said. He wants to give the youngsters from Yen City a chance. In fact, it's to prevent martial arts prodigies like you from participating in the competition. Especially since you have a good relationship with us, you will definitely help us. If you go, the first place will be yours, and his plan won't succeed. Tell me, is this bullshit first prince despicable? Fatso sneered. Qin Feiyang said, That's a good thing. Lu Hong nodded and said with a smile. Indeed, if the younger generation were to participate, we would have no hope of winning. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while, then looked at Fatso and said, Go and call Ling Yunfei. We'll meet at the gate. Okay. Fatso chuckled, turned around and ran away. Qin Feiyang looked at Feng Ling and asked, Do you want to join in the fun? Feng Ling said, If we can't participate, why should we go? All right then. Qin Feiyang nodded and said to Lu Hong, Accompany her. After saying that, he turned around and walked towards the wooden bridge. At the same time, Shi Zheng was jumping down from the balcony of the attic next door. Qin Feiyang walked over and said with a smile, Elder Shi, the palace master and Ma Cheng have already reached an agreement. There's no need to continue protecting me, right? Shi Zheng said. It's better to be careful. Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and nodded. All right, then I'll have to trouble you, Elder. Although Ma Cheng agreed, it was hard to say what Jia He would do. What if he secretly sent someone to assassinate him behind Ma Cheng's back? Moreover, there was the blood token. This force was mysterious and unfathomable. He had to be careful. The two of them arrived at the entrance. After waiting for a while, Fatso and Ling Yunfei arrived. As soon as Ling Yunfei walked over, he said, Fatso has already told me the details. It won't be a problem to enter the top 3. Don't be careless. Qin Feiyang shook his head. The first prince had prepared for so long, he would definitely not let them win easily. It was likely that many of the geniuses in this competition had already been bribed by the first prince. Next, he brought the three of them and walked out of the martial imperial palace in a dignified manner. Jiang Haotian is out. He finally showed up. Where is he going? Let's go and take a look. The spies of the various major powers all followed behind the four of them. Qin Feiyang naturally noticed it, but he didn't care. Treasure Pavilion. VIP room. Manager Li glanced around and asked curiously, Brother Jiang, where are you going to cause trouble in this group of people? Senior, you're already so old. Can't you be more serious? Qin Feiyang was very helpless. He took out a jade box and threw it on the desk. Manager Li opened the jade box and 6 top-grade red fire-colored glass pills immediately appeared. After a quick glance, he looked up at Qin Feiyang and asked, Are these used to pay off the debt? Isn't it obvious? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said angrily, Also, don't write any IOU in the future. It's annoying just looking at it. There's no other way. This is the rule. We're all honest people. We have to abide by it, right? However, these 6 pills are worth at most 25 million. It seems to be a little less than 30 million. Manager Li chuckled. Fatso said angrily, Old bastard, can't you give us a discount? Sorry, I've already given you a 9% discount. Manager Li said with a smile. A 9% discount? Fatso was stunned and said angrily, You might as well not give us a discount. How can you ask for a 9% discount when you don't even know? Manager Li sighed. Alas, I can't help it. Business is hard. In order to help you find those medicinal herbs, I almost broke my legs. How can you bargain with me here? Qin Feiyang's face twitched. He took out 2 more top-grade red fire-colored glass pills and threw them to Manager Li, saying, Take the extra as a reward for your hard work. Good. Boss Jiang is so generous. Manager Li was overjoyed. 2 top-grade red fire-colored glass pills were worth at least 8 million. In other words, he could get 3 million as a reward. As for the rest, they were public funds. He didn't dare to touch them. Let's go. Qin Feiyang called Ling Yunfei and the other 2 and walked out. Go. Manager Li was stunned and hurriedly said, Wait. Is there anything else? Qin Feiyang asked. Manager Li said, The account hasn't been settled yet. How can you leave? You still have to give me 2 top-grade red fire-colored glass pills. Qin Feiyang's body stiffened. He turned to look at him and asked, Why? Manager Li said, Nonsense, of course, to give to Jia He. Otherwise, do you think I took those 3 blood ginseng for free? Qin Feiyang frowned. Not included in the 30 million? No, Manager Li said. In this way, I bought nearly 40 million medicinal herbs this time, didn't I? Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Weren't the medicinal herbs of the potential pill a bit too expensive? Shi Zheng and Ling Yunfei next to him were also dumbfounded. What medicinal herbs were worth 40 million? Manager Li stared at him carefully and said, Boss Jiang, I have to tell you, you can't go back on your words, or I'll ask Jia He to ask for it from you. Do I look like someone who would go back on his words? Qin Feiyang glared at him angrily, took out 2 top-grade red fire-colored glass pills, and threw them over. In fact, his heart was aching. 10 top-grade red fire-colored glass pills were gone as soon as he came to the treasure pavilion. He was really bleeding a lot. Boss Jiang is indeed a man of his word. Manager Li gave him a thumbs up and laughed heartily. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, Continue to help me collect those medicinal herbs, especially the snow crystal, 9 suns flower, and blood ginseng. Manager Li smiled. As long as you have money, everything is negotiable. But can you reveal a little bit what kind of pill you want to refine? You want to know? Wait patiently. Qin Feiyang laughed, turned around and strode away. Bastard. Manager Li cursed secretly, but he was more and more curious. Fatso chased after him and frowned. Boss, I still want to save some money, but if you squander it like this, I'm afraid we'll be poor for the rest of our lives. Don't worry, when the time comes, we only need 1 pill, and we'll get back the cost. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, showing off absolute confidence. Hearing this, Shi Zheng and Ling Yunfei looked at each other and couldn't help but feel surprised. What kind of pill could be worth 40 million gold coins? Fatso's eyebrows were also full of doubts. Leaving the treasure pavilion, Shi Zheng took the three of them and rushed to the East City district. This news quickly spread to the ears of the first prince and Lin Hao. They're finally here. This time, I'm going to make a fool of you in public. Let's go and welcome them. The first prince sneered, got up, and walked out of the hall. Welcome. Lin Hao was slightly stunned and frowned. There's no need for that. The first prince said. I have to see him sign up with my own eyes before I can be completely relieved. Okay. Lin Hao nodded, got up, and followed the first prince to a square outside the palace, waiting quietly. There were many young people around. When they saw the two of them, they ran up to curry favor. They didn't know how long they had waited. In short, they were impatient. Finally, four familiar figures entered their line of sight. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also noticed the first prince and the second prince. Ling Yunfei sneered. Needless to say, they must be waiting for us. Then let them wait a little longer. Fatso smirked, glanced at the two sides of the street, and locked his eyes on a shop on the left, and said, Boss, there's a clothing shop, shall we go in and shop? Okay, I'm also planning to buy some clothes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Under the astonished gaze of the first prince and Lin Hao, Qin Feiyang and the other two went directly into the shop. These three brats are really a headache. Shi Zheng shook his head and smiled bitterly, and could only follow in. After buying clothes, they entered a shop that sold shoes. After buying shoes, the first prince and Lin Hao thought that they were coming, but they didn't expect that they would enter a jewelry shop. Your Highness, they must be doing it on purpose. Lin Hao roared angrily. Even if it's on purpose, you have to bear with it. The first prince said in a low voice, his hands hidden in his sleeves tightly clenched. Obviously, he was also very angry. Your Highness, what are you doing here? At this moment, a puzzled voice sounded. A young man in purple walked out of the crowd and strode towards the first prince. Behind him, there was a man and a woman, both of whom were in their late 20s and had extraordinary temperaments. The first prince smiled. Shuiyang, why are you here? Shuiyang said. I brought Junior Xie and Junior Wang to sign up for the competition. The first prince glanced at the man and woman, and his eyes flashed slightly. He looked at Shuiyang and said, Jiang Haotian is in that jewelry shop. Go and see what they are doing. Lin Hao added. If there's a chance, teach them a lesson. Jiang Haotian. Shuiyang's eyes suddenly surged with strong killing intent, and he sneered. Your Highness, don't worry, leave it to me. Let's go. Chapter 182. Inside the shop. Qin Feiyang was casually looking at the accessories. The shop owner was also a middle-aged fatso, but he was not as outstanding as Fatso. He followed him closely and kept introducing the items. Fatso called out, Boss, it's time to go. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. The fat shop owner immediately showed a disappointed look. This was a big customer, but unfortunately he did not sell anything. Ha! Qin Feiyang was about to turn around when he suddenly saw a red jade pendant. The fat shop owner's eyes lit up and hurriedly introduced it. Young Master Jiang, this jade pendant is called Flaming Phoenix. Look at its color, how bright it is, and the phoenix pattern, how charming it is. To be honest, young Master Jiang, the Flaming Phoenix is the most famous carving master in Yen City, carefully carved with the best fire jade. Let's not talk about its value, just its craftsmanship alone is worth collecting. The fat shop owner's mouth was like a river, exaggerating. Qin Feiyang asked, Just say it, how much is it? The fat shop owner stretched out his hand, 500,000. 500,000? Fatso shouted and walked over. He looked at the so-called Flaming Phoenix and mocked. We're not idiots. If you don't give us a reasonable price, we'll leave immediately. The fat shop owner smiled and said, 400,000, no less. Fatso sneered. It's more profitable than selling elixirs. 50,000 at most. Sell it or not. The fat shop owner's face twitched and he smiled bitterly. Brother Fatty, your bargaining is too outrageous. His eyes were full of resentment, as if to say, Brother Fatty, we're all fatso. Why do you have to make things difficult for fatso? Forget it if you don't want to sell. Fatso ignored the resentful eyes and dragged Qin Feiyang outside. The fat shop owner gritted his teeth and said, Young Master Jiang, I'll sell it even if I lose money. 50,000 it is. That's more like it. Fatso smiled proudly. Qin Feiyang asked, Do you have any more? If there's only one, I don't want it. Hearing this, the fat boss's face became very interesting. Because the more he sold, the more he would lose. But he really wanted to do business with Qin Feiyang. He gritted his teeth and nodded. Yes, there are 4 more. Fatso angrily said. Fuck, haven't you heard that the rarer something is, the more precious it is? You have so many here, and you still want to collect them? Even Fat Lord doesn't think 50,000 gold coins is worth it. The fat boss said bitterly. My Fat Lord, I'm really selling at a loss. I swear to God. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Okay, help me wrap it up. All right. The fat boss ran off to get busy. Qin Feiyang took out the Qianquan bag and looked at it carefully. A row of black lines immediately appeared on his forehead. In such a large Qianquan bag, there was not even a single gold coin. He looked at Fatso and said angrily, Didn't I say very clearly that you would leave me some pocket money? Now I don't even have a single silver coin. How do you want me to pay the bill? Qin Feiyang and Shi Zheng were stunned. The fat boss was also petrified on the spot. A dignified supreme-grade alchemist actually had no money? Fatso shrunk his neck and said with an embarrassed smile, The financial power is now in Lu Hong's hands. Fat Lord can't make the decision. If you want to settle the score, go to her. Qin Feiyang's veins were bulging. This guy was really a fraud. He had lost all his face. Jiang Haotian, you're too shabby. You're an alchemist after all. Do you want me to lend you some? At this moment, Shuiyang walked in with a man and a woman. Fatso frowned and said in a low voice, Boss, he's Shuiyang. The other 2 are also core disciples of the Danwang Hall. The man is Xiefang, and the woman is Wuxia. Qin Feiyang said, I know he's Shuiyang. I've seen him in the treasure pavilion before. Shuiyang glanced at them, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said playfully, How about it? Do you want it? I don't charge interest. Shi Zheng walked up and said lightly, Isn't it just 250,000 gold coins? I'll give it to you. A cold light flashed in the depths of Shuiyang's eyes. He looked at the fat boss and said, No matter what Jiang Haotian buys, I'll take it all and give you double the price. The fat boss was a little embarrassed. He didn't dare to offend Qin Feiyang. Shuiyang was Jiahei's personal disciple. He also didn't dare to offend him. He begged, Young Master Shui, if you have any grudges with young Master Jiang, can you settle it elsewhere? I'm just a small businessman. Don't make things difficult for me, okay? Why? Do you have a big objection? Shuiyang's eyes were unfriendly. No. How would I dare to have an objection? The fat boss hurriedly waved his hand and looked at Qin Feiyang pleadingly. He hoped that Qin Feiyang could take a step back. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and said, It seems that the lesson I taught you last time wasn't deep enough. At the mention of this, Shuiyang's face became incomparably ferocious. Qin Feiyang turned a blind eye and said lightly, You want whatever I want. Are you sure? I'm sure. Shuiyang said word by word. His heart was already occupied by hatred. Fine, you're awesome. Qin Feiyang gave a thumbs up and turned to look at the fat boss saying, I want everything you have here. Listen well, everything. The fat boss was dumbfounded. This is a great move. Shi Zheng praised. This way, not only could he help the fat boss out of the predicament, but he could also ruthlessly scam Shuiyang. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Shuiyang clenched his fists, his gaze frighteningly gloomy. Yo. Fatso let out a strange cry and joked. Young Master Shui, why aren't you saying anything? Fat Lord, let me remind you that you're Jiahei's disciple. If you don't keep your word, you won't be the only one losing face, but your master will too. Shuiyang said sternly. Fatso, say one more word and I'll cripple you. Come. If you don't cripple me today, you'll be Fat Lord's great-grandson. Fatso took a step forward and provoked arrogantly. You're courting death. Shui Yang's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. But just as he raised his hand, it was grabbed by Xiafang, who shook his head and said, Brother Shui, don't be provoked by him. Wuxia nodded and said, The palace is just next door. If you fight here, even Elder Jiao won't be able to save you. It won't hurt to endure it for a while. Fatso immediately gave the two of them a thumbs up and chuckled. I'll give you a thumbs up. Xiafang and Wuxia raised their eyebrows and a cold light flashed in their eyes. Boring. Fatso waved his hand in disdain and looked at Shui Yang. They're right. Just endure it. You're just a coward anyway. Xiafang frowned and said, Fatso, don't go overboard. Fatso shouted, A fat lord thought you were very smart. So you're an idiot too. Do you want to stand up for him? Xiafang said, If you're so capable, let's meet in the competition. Don't just talk here. Fatso sized him up and said, I'm sorry, Fat Lord's motto has always been to avoid violence if he can talk. After some thought, he added, Besides, you can't even win against him in words. What right do you have to fight with Fat Lord? Go take a piss and look at your reflection. Xiafang's eyes were burning with anger. This damned Fatso's mouth really needs to be taught a lesson. Seeing that Xiafang was also enraged, Wuxia's pupils constricted, and she hurriedly dragged the two of them outside. Fatso twisted his neck and said indifferently, People with low IQ shouldn't come out for a stroll, lest they embarrass themselves. Bastard! I'm going to destroy you. Shui Yang and Xiafang roared at the same time, and turned to charge at Fatso. Even Wuxia couldn't hold them back. Stop! At this moment, a cold shout sounded. The eldest prince and Lin Hao walked in one after another. The main character is here. Fatso tactfully retreated to Qin Feiyang's side. The eldest prince coldly glanced at Shui Yang and the other two and said angrily, What's going on? How dare you fight here? Do you want to die? Keep pretending, keep pretending. Fatso sneered. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Shui Yang and the other two were ordered by someone. And the person who ordered them was undoubtedly the eldest prince. Shui Yang glared at Qin Feiyang and the others and said, Your Highness, it's all their fault for provoking us first, especially that Fatso. He's so arrogant and even humiliated you, Your Highness. The eldest prince turned to look at Fatso with a cold gaze. Shizheng frowned and said expressionlessly, Think before you speak. Shui Yang said angrily, Elder Shi, you're with them. Of course you'll speak for them. Bastard! Shizheng was furious. He stepped forward and grabbed Shui Yang's arm, saying, I'll take you to the Danwang Hall now. I'd like to ask Elder Jia how he educates his disciples. Shui Yang's face immediately turned pale. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile, Your Highness, how do you plan to deal with the troublemakers? If you don't deal with them, I'm afraid your reputation as the eldest prince will be ruined today. The eldest prince was furious to the extreme. He wanted to use this as a pretext to make a fuss and frustrate Qin Feiyang, but he didn't expect that he would end up digging his own grave. Because if this matter really blew up, they would be the ones to suffer. After all, the boss of this shop had witnessed the entire process. Although he could threaten the fat boss, Qin Feiyang, and the others also had the Martial Imperial Hall behind them. Therefore, the fat boss would definitely tell the truth in the end. Slap! The eldest prince slapped Shui Yang's face without hesitation. A bright red palm print instantly appeared. Shui Yang was stunned. But the eldest prince didn't care about him. He looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. Brother Jiang, are you satisfied? What do you think? Qin Feiyang asked. Slap! The eldest prince slapped Xiafang and Wuxia again and asked with a smile. What about now? Qin Feiyang smiled. Your Highness is selfless. I admire you. The eldest prince said. That's what I should do. I wonder why Brother Jiang came to the East District. If I can help, please feel free to ask. If I really need your Highness' help, I will definitely not be polite. Qin Feiyang smiled and turned to the fat boss asking, Boss, is it done? It's done. The fat boss pushed an exquisite wooden box in front of Qin Feiyang with a trace of gratitude in his eyes. Shizheng let go of Shui Yang and went over to settle the bill. He looked at Shui Yang and said, Young people should learn to be good. Don't just sow discord all day. It won't do you any good in the future. Elder Shi is right. The eldest prince smiled and shouted at Shui Yang and the others. Why aren't you apologizing to Elder Shi? Elder Shi, I'm sorry. Elder Shi, please forgive me for my previous offense. The three of them bowed. Shizheng said, forget it, this matter is over. Thank you for your magnanimity, Elder Shi. Chapter 183. Fighting with us is simply looking for a beating. Fatso laughed gloatingly. Let's go. Qin Feiyang put away the wooden box, nodded and smiled at the eldest prince, then called Fatso and the other two and strode out of the jewelry shop. Let's go too. The eldest prince waved his hand. After the two groups of people left, the fat boss breathed a sigh of relief. Shui Yang rubbed his burning face and stared at Qin Feiyang and the others in front of him. His eyes filled with hostility. The eldest prince sighed and said, I had no choice but to hit you just now. Please forgive me. It's okay. Shui Yang and the other two shook their heads. The eldest prince whispered, don't worry, I will definitely avenge you in the competition. Xie Fang sneered and said, if they participate in the competition, you don't need to show up, I can beat them. Wang Xia nodded and said, yes, it is said that Jiang Haoyin is only an 8-star martial master. There is nothing to worry about. The eldest prince looked at the two of them in surprise and said with a smile, if you can really do it, I will reward each of you with a top-grade red fireglass pill. Thank you, Your Highness. The two of them were overjoyed and hurriedly bowed to thank him. The eldest prince nodded and caught up with Qin Feiyang in a few steps. He smiled and said, Brother Jiang, I wonder if my top-grade red fireglass pill is ready. Oh. Qin Feiyang patted his head and said in distress, Your Highness, I'm really sorry. I've been too busy these days and forgot about it. When I go back, I'll immediately start refining pills. The eldest prince raised his eyebrows and waved his hand and said with a smile, It's okay, as long as you give it to me before I get married. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, It definitely won't delay Your Highness's marriage. Right now, he only had a total of 6 top-grade red fireglass pills. If he gave it to the eldest prince, there would only be one left. To be honest, he really didn't want to give it to the eldest prince. But with his current strength, he couldn't swallow these 5 top-grade red fireglass pills. Look, isn't that Luo Qingzhu? Suddenly, Lin Hao pointed to the front, his eyes full of surprise. Everyone looked over. 2 white-clothed girls walked hand in hand in the crowd, forming a beautiful scene that attracted the gazes of countless men. She's here too? Qin Feiyang was surprised. One of them was indeed Luo Qingzhu, and the girl beside her was Zhao Shuang'er. Little sister Qingzhu. The first prince's eyes lit up. He stretched out his hand and called out to her affectionately. Then he strode after her. Lin Hao, Shui Yang, and the other 2 quickly followed. Sister Qingzhu? Fatso was stunned and said angrily, Boss, he actually dared to tease your wife. Even if he's the first prince, we can't tolerate it. Go and kill him. Qin Feiyang's face twitched and he gave Fatso a knock on the head. Ouch. Fatso howled in pain and said, Boss, why did you hit Fat Lord? Is Fat Lord wrong? Qin Feiyang said with a dark face, I'll tell you again. Whether it's Lin Yi or Luo Qingzhu, our relationship is innocent. Explaining is tantamount to covering up. Fatso pursed his lips. Qin Feiyang's veins were bulging. He raised his head and wanted to knock on Fatso's head again. But when he saw Fatso's pitiful look, he couldn't do it. Shizheng said in surprise, Jiang Haoyin, do you know Luo Qingzhu? We've met a few times. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, More than a few times. They are about to get married privately. I guess they will have a baby in a few years. Fatso murmured in a low voice. Pfft. Ling Yunfei couldn't help but laugh. This Fatso is too funny. Shizheng also couldn't help laughing. I really owe you in my previous life. Qin Feiyang glared at Fatso. He also felt powerless against this bastard. In front, the first prince laughed. Little sister Qingzhu, why are you here? Who is this beautiful lady? Luo Qingzhu smiled faintly. She is a core disciple of the martial imperial palace in Star Moon City, called Zhao Shuang. We are only here to play in Yin City, and just happened to hear that you were holding a competition, so we came over to take a look out of curiosity. She then looked at Zhao Shuang-er and introduced him. Little sister Shuang-er, he is the first prince that I mentioned to you before. Shuang-er greets the first prince. Zhao Shuang-er bowed. The first prince waved his hand and laughed. Miss Shuang-er, we are all on the same side. There is no need to be so polite. However, the first prince did not notice that although Luo Qingzhu and Luo Qingzhu were talking to him, their gazes would occasionally sweep towards Qin Feiyang, who was behind them. Qin Feiyang walked over with a faint smile on his face. But suddenly, Lin Hao stood in front of him and said disdainfully, "Do you know who she is? Don't try to claim connections." Qin Feiyang was stunned. Luo Qingzhu and Luo Qingzhu were also stunned. Whoosh! A figure swept past the two of them and ran in front of Luo Qingzhu. It was Fatso. He looked at Luo Qingzhu with a fawning smile and said, "Sister-in-law, you're finally here. You don't know how much boss misses you. He misses you every day. Bastard, have you had enough?" Qin Feiyang angrily roared and went forward to kick him. Fatso hid behind Luo Qingzhu like a wisp of smoke and made a face at him. Sister-in-law? Everyone present was stunned, including the surrounding pedestrians. Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang-er were the same. Qin Feiyang glared at Fatso, looked at Luo Qingzhu apologetically, and laughed. "I'm sorry, he likes to mess around." It's fine, it's fine." Luo Qingzhu shook her head, still unable to react. Messing around? The first prince frowned. It should be. Luo Qingzhu had been in Star Moon City all year round. How could she know Jiang Haotian? It was even more impossible for them to have such an ambiguous relationship. He smiled and said, "Little sister Qingzhu, let me introduce you. He is the famous Jiang Haotian." This relationship is a bit complicated. Zhao Shuang-er looked at the first prince and the others, and a strange light flashed in her beautiful eyes. Then, she looked at Jiang Haotian and said with a playful smile, "Long time no see. I heard that you're doing well here, so I discussed with Sister Qingzhu and came to find you to eat and drink. Do you welcome us?" "Of course you're welcome." Qin Feiyang laughed. The first prince raised his eyebrows and asked, "Little sister Qingzhu, do you know each other?" Luo Qingzhu finally came back to her senses and nodded. "We've known each other for a long time." At that moment, the first prince's expression changed. After all this time, it was just his wishful thinking? Especially Lin Hao. It was as if he had been slapped hard in the face. His face was burning hot. The two of them had known each other for a long time, and their relationship was not shallow. However, he had stood in front of the other party and told the other party not to claim any relationship. This was really ironic. The atmosphere here was a bit awkward. Luo Qingzhu looked at the two groups of people and roughly understood what was going on. She asked, "Your Highness, I wonder if I can participate in the competition?" The first prince was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Why do you want to participate? If you want something, just ask me directly." Luo Qingzhu said with a faint smile, "We've known each other for so long. Don't you understand me? I like to rely on my own efforts to fight for it." The first prince hesitated for a moment and nodded. "All right, I'll take you to sign up. Brother Jiang, what about you? Are you interested? The rewards this time are very rich." Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "Since that's the case, I'll give it a try." The first prince and the others were overjoyed. The previous unhappiness was instantly thrown to the back of their minds. They couldn't wait to lead the few people to the square. On the left side of the square there was a hall. A group of people walked in. In addition to Qin Feiyang, Ling Yunfei, Luo Qingzhu, and Zhao Shuang-er had also signed up. As for Fatso, no matter how Xiefang provoked him, he had an extremely contemptuous expression. Xiefang was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Walking out of the hall, Qin Feiyang stood on a step and asked, "Your Highness, when will it start?" The first prince said with a smile, "It can start at any time." But in his heart he sneered. "I'm waiting for you," Qin Feiyang said. "Then hurry up. After all, I'm very busy and don't have time to delay here." "All right." The first prince nodded and shouted, Commander Su immediately arranged for the elimination round to begin immediately. Yes. A loud and clear voice sounded. Following closely, a burly man in armor walked out of the main hall with a bold and resolute manner. He jumped a few times and landed on a high platform in front of the square. He shouted, "The elimination round is about to begin. Participants, enter the square immediately." At that moment, one by one, the teenagers ran into the square. Those who didn't participate quickly left the square. At the same time, from the gate of the palace, a large group of black armored guards emerged. They were like a group of lions. They quickly dispersed and stood at the edge of the square, expressionlessly scanning the crowd below. "Jiang Haotian, Ling Yunfei, be careful," Shi Zheng warned, and also left the square with Fatso. "Let's go." Qin Feiyang walked down the steps and entered the square. Ling Yunfei followed closely. Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang nodded to the first prince and also entered the square, standing in the crowd. The first prince glanced at Qin Feiyang and warned Wang Xia and Xie Fang, "Don't touch him first. On the day of the finals, we'll ruthlessly trample on him. But we can test his depth first. As for the trash next to him, get him out of the arena as soon as possible." He was referring to Ling Yunfei. "Understood." Xie Fang and Luo Qingzhu nodded, a cold light flashing in their eyes. Subsequently, Shui Yang and Lin Hao followed behind the first prince and walked up the high platform. The square suddenly quieted down. The first prince stood in the middle of the high platform and glanced at the crowd below. His robe fluttered in the wind, and his whole body emitted the aura of a king. There are a total of more than 1,300 people participating in this competition, but only 10 people can enter the finals. So, everyone must work hard. I also ask everyone to stop before it's too late, and try not to do anything to hurt the other party. I believe everyone already knows the prizes of this competition. I won't explain more, just say one thing. In the elimination round, no weapons are allowed. Those who violate this rule will be disqualified. Finished. He retreated to the side with his hands behind his back. Looking at Qin Feiyang in the crowd, he secretly sneered, "Without that dagger, I want to see what big waves you can make." Commander Su took a few steps forward and shouted, "Are you all ready?" "We're ready." Thousands of teenagers roared as if they had been injected with chicken blood. For Qin Feiyang, the royal banquet didn't have the slightest attraction. But for the vast majority of people, being able to participate in the royal banquet was a supreme honor. Chapter 184. Let the elimination round begin. Following Commander Su's words, everyone exerted all their strength and attacked the people around them. Bang bang bang. Someone won. Someone was bound to be defeated. In an instant, there were endless screams. One by one, the teenagers fell down. Almost in the blink of an eye, half of the people were eliminated. The battle was cruel. Especially in this kind of chaotic battle, if one was not careful, one would be attacked and lose the qualification to continue. At the same time, Qin Feiyang was also besieged. Ling Yunfei fought against dozens of people and had the upper hand. Qin Feiyang did not make a move from beginning to end. He stood in the field and glanced at the chaotic crowd. His eyes were as calm as water. "How dare you be so arrogant in this chaotic battle? You're courting death." When a tall and sturdy man noticed Qin Feiyang, his eyes immediately flashed with a ruthless look. Seeing that Ling Yunfei was more than 10 meters away and was entangled by two people, he took a step forward and charged towards Qin Feiyang. However, without waiting for him to get close, Ling Yunfei appeared in front of him like a flash of lightning. With a palm strike, the afterimages of 9 huge palms struck towards him, covering the sky and the earth. It was the illusion palm. As soon as Ling Yunfei entered the martial imperial palace, he became a core disciple, and had already learned the illusion palm. How is this possible? The burly man's face was filled with disbelief. Previously he was entangled by others, but in an instant he rushed over. This speed was too fast. With your little ability, you dare to sneak attack him. Ling Yunfei's eyes were filled with disdain as his palm landed on the burly man's chest. Ah! The burly man screamed and was blown away on the spot, spitting out blood. The few unlucky ones behind him were also seriously injured and fell to the ground. Cripple him. A group of teenagers suddenly swarmed towards Ling Yunfei. Cripple me? Since that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless. Ling Yunfei smiled coldly and punched out with his heart-lock-killing fist. A teenager's heart was shattered and he fell to the ground dead. What? Dead? The others trembled both physically and mentally as their faces turned ghastly pale. The battlefield needs to be watered with blood. Stop when it's appropriate. That's all bullshit. Ling Yunfei's long sky-blue hair danced behind his head like a waterfall, and his entire body emitted an astonishing aura. Using the origin convergence steps, he was like a hungry wolf that had charged into a flock of sheep. For a moment, this place was in complete chaos. Without exception, those who were struck by him were either killed or injured. His entire body was covered in blood, like a blood-soaked azura. The people around him were scared out of their wits and fled in panic. On the high platform, the eldest prince's shock was clearly written on his face. All this time, he had never taken Ling Yunfei seriously, and had only regarded him as a small fry. But he never thought that he would be so strong. It was also at this moment. Qin Feiyang, who hadn't moved for a long time, shook his head and said, "That's all." Previously, he was observing everyone's strength. He wanted to see what kind of opponent the first prince had prepared for him. In the end, he was greatly disappointed. There were more than 1,300 people, and none of them was a martial grandmaster. The highest was a 9-star martial master. Even the number of 9-star martial masters could be counted on one hand. But thinking about it, it made sense. In a small place like the county of Yan, it was rare for someone to step into the martial grandmaster realm before the age of 18. Only a martial arts genius like Feng Ling Er could do it. An elimination round without a martial grandmaster was nothing to worry about. It seems that I don't need to take part in this battle. Glancing at Ling Yunfei, Qin Feiyang muttered and turned to look at Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang. His face couldn't help but twitch. Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang stood there motionless, but the people around them acted as if they didn't see anything. No one attacked them. Qin Feiyang was filled with emotions. Beautiful women were treated differently. But he also knew that the biggest reason was Luo Qingzhu's identity. Who would dare to touch the precious daughter of the Precious Treasure Pavilion's pavilion master? Once one was blacklisted by the Precious Treasure Pavilion, it would be worse than being blacklisted by the Danwang Hall, the Martial Imperial Hall, or the royal family. Because as long as one was a martial artist, they needed wealth and resources. The Precious Treasure Pavilion was undoubtedly the source of wealth and resources. Jiang Haotian, fight me if you dare. Suddenly, a loud and cold shout rang out. A purple-clothed youth appeared extremely valiant as he walked towards Qin Feiyang, as if there was no one around him. Hiding behind Ling Yunfei, what kind of man are you? If you think that you can enter the finals like this, I can tell you very seriously, dream on. At the same time, there were also 3 youths in luxurious clothes. They were like 3 human-shaped tyrannosauruses. They continuously sent people in front of them flying, emitting a strong aura as they pressed towards Qin Feiyang. Their gazes were extremely sharp. Qin Feiyang was stunned and turned his head to look at them one by one. The 4 of them looked slightly mature. They were obviously almost 18 years old, and had the strength of a 9-star martial master. In Yan City, they could be considered top geniuses. Seeing this, Zhao Shuang smiled playfully. Jiang Haotian, do you need help? What do you think? Qin Feiyang grinned. You are still so arrogant. Zhao Shuang rolled her eyes at him. But this kind of man was more charming. Humph. Ling Yunfei snorted and quickly came in front of Qin Feiyang. He glanced at the 4 people and said disdainfully, "Just 4 trash. You don't need to do anything. I will handle it." Arrogant. The cold light in the eyes of the 4 people surged. Ling Yunfei, arrogance will pay the price. We will fight with you. At this time, Xie Feng and Wang Xia rushed out of the crowd, stepping on the shoulders of the crowd and rushing over. Ling Yunfei said, "It seems that these people have been bribed by the first prince." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "As expected. Not only them, Those who just attacked us probably got a lot of benefits. In that case, we don't need to be merciful. Ling Yunfei sneered. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. It seemed that this guy had never been merciful, right? He asked. Your strength seems to have become stronger? I forgot to tell you. Yesterday, I stepped into the 9-star martial master and finally surpassed you. Ling Yunfei smiled proudly. Surpassed? Qin Feiyang was stunned. The corner of his mouth pursed into a playful smile. He chuckled and said, Let me tell you a secret. Before I went to Black Bear City, I was already a 9-star martial master. What? Ling Yunfei was dumbfounded. His heart was instantly filled with loss. Surpassing Qin Feiyang had always been his wish. He thought that he had done it this time. But he didn't expect that the other party was still one step ahead of him. This feeling was really unbearable. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Suddenly, he let out a low roar. His heart was filled with unwillingness and disappointment. It turned into a monstrous battle intent and welcomed the two of them. Although he couldn't compare to Qin Feiyang, he was determined to be the number one person under Qin Feiyang. What Xiefang? What Wuxia? Trample them all under his feet. Bang! Bang! The three of them fought crazily. When the others saw this, they retreated one after another, giving them a wide battlefield. They are both 9-star martial masters, but this child is facing two opponents alone. His expression doesn't change at all. His battle intent is endless. This Ling Yunfei is very likely to become the second Feng Ling heir. He entered the martial ancestor realm before the age of 18. The future proud son of Yan County. The crowd below the stage discussed in low voices, their eyes filled with shock. Shi Zheng was also very surprised. He only knew that Ling Yunfei's talent was not bad, and that he had a good relationship with Jiang Haotian. But he didn't expect his talent to be so heaven-defying. He had been in the Martial Imperial Hall for less than a year, and he already had such strength. He might even surpass Feng Ling heir in the future. Zhao Shuang'er walked to Qin Feiyang and asked curiously, Where did you find this helper? Luo Qingzhu said, He is from the Ling family of Black Bear City. When I went to Black Bear City, I heard that he was called trash. But now it seems that he doesn't live up to his name. If the Ling family had nurtured him since he was young, his achievements wouldn't be limited to this. Qin Feiyang shook his head and ridiculed. The Ling family probably didn't realize how valuable Ling Yunfei was until they were destroyed. With his talent and potential, even in the imperial capital, he was a top martial arts genius. Even Feng Ling heir couldn't compare to him. Luo Qingzhu turned to look at Qin Feiyang, a strange light flashing in her beautiful eyes. If she didn't meet this person, Ling Yunfei would still be the trash in Black Bear City. He wouldn't have the chance to shine here today. It could be said that this person was Ling Yunfei's talent scout. But she was very curious. Ling Yunfei had lived in Black Bear City for more than 10 years, and no one had discovered his potential. But how did this person find it at a glance? Was it because he was very good at judging people? Or was it because he had seen too many geniuses? At this time, the four well-dressed youths surrounded him. Glancing at Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang'er, one of them said coldly, Get out of the way. Okay. Zhao Shuang'er nodded and pulled Luo Qingzhu to the side. After a year, how much had this guy grown? She was really looking forward to it. The four people spread out and each took a side, surrounding Qin Feiyang in the center. The youth in purple sneered, Jiang Haotian, this young master wants to know if your strength can compare to your alchemy skills. I don't think I will disappoint you. Qin Feiyang put his hands behind his back with a faint smile on his face. Return to origin palm. The young master in purple looked cold and suddenly waved his palm, blowing a hurricane. When it blew on his face, there was a pain of skin tearing. This palm. It was really amazing. It had the strength of 13 brute elephants. The Lin family? Qin Feiyang was surprised. He didn't expect that the Lin family was hiding such a genius. Swish. He took a step back, his clothes rustling, and his expression was as calm as water. Illusion palm. Seeing this, the youth behind Qin Feiyang didn't hesitate to slap. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and stepped on the ground, moving to the left. He calmly turned around and looked at that person suspiciously. Don't say that I'm a traitor. Because you're not a disciple of the martial imperial palace, I don't need to help you. And because you're the biggest threat, I can only join hands with them to eliminate you first. Chapter 185. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang's brows also relaxed. This person was 100% bought by the first prince, but he was too lazy to point it out. He was too lazy to talk nonsense. Overlord Fist. The other two youths also attacked Qin Feiyang. Fatso reminded, Boss, be careful. The Overlord Fist is the perfect martial skill of the royal family. It is said to be very fierce. Commander Su frowned and shouted, the people outside are not allowed to interrupt. Tieste. Fatso disdainfully raised his middle finger. Commander Su's veins were bulging. The commander of the royal guards was actually humiliated by a brat in public. He was really angry. Fatso, behave. Shizhou scolded in a low voice, then looked at Commander Su and smiled apologetically. Emph. Commander Su snorted and continued to scan the battlefield. He secretly despised him for doing such an indecent action in public. He really couldn't understand why the Martial Imperial Hall would take in such an uncultured person. On the field, when the two youths of the royal family attacked, the two youths of the Lin family, and the Martial Imperial Hall immediately surrounded him. The Overlord Fist was incomparably fierce. The Illusion Palm was mysterious and unpredictable. The Return to Origin Palm was incomparably fierce. 4 9-star martial masters, 3 perfect martial skills, and their true chi covered the sky and earth, almost cutting off all of Qin Feiyang's escape routes. The first prince and the other two on the high platform couldn't help but smile. Although it was just to test Qin Feiyang's strength, if he could make a fool of himself in front of everyone, it was still something to be happy about. Zhao Shuang frowned and said in a low voice, let's go help him. Luo Qingzhu nodded and suddenly grabbed Zhao Shuang and said, look at his expression. Expression? Zhao Shuang was stunned. She looked at Qin Feiyang's face and suddenly felt surprised. At this moment, Qin Feiyang's expression didn't have the slightest bit of panic. He was still so calm and relaxed. Where is his confidence? Zhao Shuang was suspicious. If it was someone else, facing the siege of the 4 youths, they would have been scared witless. However, this fellow didn't seem to take it to heart. In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them had ominous glints in their eyes. They were only half a step away from Qin Feiyang. He was about to be beaten up. Whoosh! At this moment, Qin Feiyang took a step forward, and with a strange speed, he passed by the 2 young men from the Martial Emperor Hall and the royal family, leaving the encirclement. That's right. His confidence comes from his auxiliary martial skills. Zhao Shuang's eyes lit up. How could this be? However, the 4 people's expressions suddenly changed. He quickly retracted his hand. But it was too late. The fist and the palm collided with each other. Their faces paled as their arms broke on the spot. In the meantime, like 4 meteorites, they flew out horizontally. Accompanied by a series of banging sounds, it smashed onto the ground more than 10 meters away. Puff! Immediately, a gush of hot blood rushed up to his throat, and he violently spat it out. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. There were even some people whose eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. Dead silence. They all thought that this time, Qin Feiyang would lose a layer of skin, even if he did not die. But in the end, not only did he dodge it easily, but he also seriously injured the 4 of them without any effort. Even during the entire process, he had his hands behind his back. Everyone could only see calmness, composure and confidence from him. The smiles on the faces of the eldest prince, Shui Yang and Lin Hao also froze. 4 9-star martial masters were injured just like that? This was too ridiculous. One had to know that Qin Feiyang had not even made a move yet. At this moment, 2 more screams were heard. Everyone looked over, and was stunned once again. Xie Fang and Wang Xia were both defeated by Ling Yunfei. The 2 of them were lying on the ground, their faces as pale as paper. Their bodies were twitching nonstop, and their mouths were foaming with blood. On the other hand, although Ling Yunfei was also injured, His eyes were like torches, and his spirit was hale and hearty. His fighting spirit was even stronger than before. Why did this happen? The eldest prince clenched his hands tightly together, his face gloomy to the extreme. Xia Feng and Wang Xia stood up and stared at Ling Yunfei with eyes full of disbelief. The same cultivation level. The same perfect martial skill. But why were the two of them still defeated by Ling Yunfei even when they joined hands? Ling Yunfei looked at the two of them with contempt, turned around and walked to Qin Feiyang, and said with an evil smile, "How is it?" "Amazing." Qin Feiyang gave him a thumbs up. Ling Yunfei twisted his arm and chuckled. "I haven't had enough fun yet. Don't make a move next. I alone am enough to deal with them." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Didn't you see? I haven't made a move yet." Ling Yunfei was stunned. Looking at Qin Feiyang's hands behind his back, he immediately laughed out loud. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. In such a chaotic battlefield, the two of them still had the mood to talk and laugh there. It was enough to see how confident they were in themselves, and how disdainful they were to the other contestants. It was as if in their eyes, this competition was just a boring game. The eldest prince and the other two on the high platform, Xia Feng and the other 5 on the field, were all red in the face, because Ling Yunfei's laughter was too ear-piercing. It was simply mocking their incompetence. Xia Feng and the other 5 looked at each other from a distance, and at the same time, they took out a supreme-grade healing pill and a bone-replenishing pill and consumed it. A shocking cold light flashed in their eyes. Fatso cried out. Some people fought with Jiang Laoda, and in the end, they even took the pills refined by Jiang Laoda. Isn't this embarrassing? Fat Lord thinks that he is already very shameless, but I didn't expect that there would be someone more shameless than Fat Lord. No, it should be called despicable. In front of countless people, Fatso ridiculed without restraint, and his saliva splattered everywhere. Xia Feng and the other 5 looked at him in unison, and their eyes were filled with murderous intent. Commander Su also looked at Fatso and said gloomily, "I've already said that the people outside the field are not allowed to interrupt. Did you forget? Do you want me to teach you a lesson?" "Lord Commander, you're in the wrong here. Did you hear Fat Lord mention names? Fat Lord is talking about some people. It could be him, or it could be him. How can you be so sure that Fat Lord is talking about the people on the field?" "Sir Commander, you represent the royal family. Is it really okay to make things out of nothing and slander others?" Fatso said earnestly. "I made things out of nothing? I slandered others." Commander Su was stunned when he heard it. When he came to his senses, a strong anger suddenly rose from his body. Fatso shrunk his neck and hid behind Shizheng. He stuck his head out and said with a trembling voice, "Sir Commander, Fat Lord is just talking about the facts. Don't bully others with your power." "Damn Fatso, get over here and accept your death." Commander Su was seething with anger. "Bullying the weak? What kind of man are you?" Fatso said angrily. This time, on the contrary, Fatso became the focus of everyone's attention. Even those teenagers who were fighting on the field stopped and looked at Fatso speechlessly. How could there be such a person in the world? Commander Su clenched his hands and his whole body was trembling with anger. "I can't take it anymore." Suddenly, he let out an angry roar and jumped down from the high platform. Then he rushed towards the fatty with a ferocious aura. "Look, the palace commander is bullying others. The face of the royal family has been lost by him." Fatso hurriedly shouted. The eldest prince shouted, "Commander Su, come back." However, Commander Su turned a deaf ear to him. He only had eyes for Fatso, and wanted to cut him into pieces. "I told you to come back. Didn't you hear me?" The eldest prince shouted. Commander Su quivered and suddenly came back to his senses. At that moment, his whole body was dripping with cold sweat. He secretly cursed. How could he be so stupid? If he really made a move here, then he would be knowingly breaking the law, which would add to his crime. This damned fat pig really had sinister intentions. Phew. He let out a long breath, turned around and jumped onto the high platform, bowed and said, "I was confused for a moment. Please forgive me, Your Highness." The eldest prince waved his hand and said, Step aside. Yes. Commander Su responded respectfully and retreated behind the eldest prince. He raised his head and looked at Fatso. The murderous intent in his eyes was not concealed at all. Count yourself lucky. Fatso snorted coldly. Don't think that he was really fooling around, in fact he was very smart. The eldest prince took a step forward and coldly glanced at the square below. More than 1,300 people. Until now, only 50 or 60 people were left. Except for Qin Feiyang, Luo Qianxue, and Zhao Shuang'er, the others were all injured. He silently calculated in his heart and shouted, "Continue!" At the same time, he gave a look to Xie Fang and the others. The battle immediately began. But Xie Fang and the others did not deal with Qin Feiyang and Ling Yunfei anymore. Like hungry tigers pouncing on sheep, they rushed to kill the others. What's going on? Ling Yunfei was a little stunned. Isn't it because we're afraid of you? Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang'er walked over with a faint smile on their faces. Afraid of us? Ling Yunfei was slightly stunned, and then suddenly understood, and said with an evil smile, "It's normal to be afraid of us." Normal? Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang'er were a little speechless. This person was really narcissistic. These kind of pampered young masters and young ladies will not understand the taste of people like us who crawled out from a pile of corpses. Ling Yunfei coldly laughed. That's true. Zhao Shuang'er nodded. One was pampered since childhood, the other lived on the edge of life and death since childhood. The difference between the two was not just a little, especially the temperament and the state of the battle. While the four were chatting, Xie Fang and the others soon eliminated the rest of the participants. Although they were not the opponents of Qin Feiyang and Luo Qianxue, but to deal with the other youths, they could completely crush them. At this point, on the blood-stained square, only Qin Feiyang and the others were left. The eldest prince walked to the edge of the high platform and glanced at the 10 people. His gaze locked onto Ling Yunfei, and he coldly said, "Your right to participate in the competition is revoked." Revoked? Ling Yunfei frowned and asked, "Why?" The eldest prince said, "I already said that you should stop when the time is right, but you ignored my order and deliberately harmed people's lives. Shouldn't you be disqualified? If I don't revoke your right, how can I convince the others?" Xie Fang and the others immediately laughed at his misfortune. What a joke! Qin Feiyang suddenly sneered, and walked in front of Ling Yunfei, looked up at the eldest prince and said lightly, "Your Highness, think about it again. What did you say?" Chapter 186. You can't remember? Then let me remind you. You said that everyone should stop when it's appropriate, and try not to harm each other's lives. Your Highness, do you need me to explain the meaning of try not to harm each other? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, but there was a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. Fatso, who was outside the arena, could not help but nod and say, "That's right. You didn't say that we had to stop when it's appropriate. What right do you have to disqualify Ling Yunfei?" He added, "Is it because you're the first prince?" There was a cold glint in the first prince's eyes as he said faintly, "You're right, but you can't kill people as you wish." As you wish? I don't agree with that. When those people said that they were going to cripple Ling Yunfei, why didn't you jump out and disqualify them? If your Highness thinks that this is a competition organized by you, and that you can do whatever you want, then I don't think there's any need for this competition to continue. Your Highness, it seems that I've offended you. Ling Yunfei, let's go. We've had enough fun. It's time to go back. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and walked out of the arena without hesitation. Ling Yunfei shook his head and laughed mockingly, then followed him out. Looking at the backs of the two, the first prince's face was almost distorted. All right, just pretend that I didn't say anything. Gather here 8 days later in the morning. Those who are late will be disqualified immediately. He said coldly, then turned and whispered a few words in Shui Yang's ear. Then, he led Lin Hao into the palace. It was obvious that he was extremely angry now. Clowns. Qin Feiyang sneered inwardly. He stopped and turned to look at the palace gate, his eyes flickering. Zhao Shuang'er followed Qin Feiyang's gaze and patted him on the shoulder in annoyance. She said unhappily, "What are you looking at? We came all the way here to find you. Are you going to leave us here? Find me? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He turned his head and looked at the two women in surprise. What do you think? We don't have the time to visit Yen City. Zhao Shuang'er rolled her eyes at him. Then why are you here? Qin Feiyang looked at them in confusion, then chuckled and said, Could it be that you miss me so much that you came to throw yourself into my arms? I'm a little flattered. The two women looked at each other and gritted their teeth as they looked at him. Ling Yunfei's face twitched uncontrollably. She didn't expect this fellow to have such an indecent side. Cough cough. Qin Feiyang coughed and smiled. It's just a joke. Don't take it seriously. You really haven't changed at all. You're still the same bastard. Luo Qianxue rolled her eyes at him and said calmly, Actually, it was mother who sent me and sister Shuang, to testify for you. Aunt Shui? Qin Feiyang was stunned. A string in his heart was touched, and he couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. At this moment, Shuiyang walked over and cupped his hands with a smile. Miss Qingzhu, the first prince invites you to the palace for a chat, and this is Miss Shuang. Luo Qingzhu frowned and said apologetically, I'm sorry. Please tell him that I still have some private matters to deal with. I'll go and talk to him another day. Shuiyang glanced at Qin Feiyang and smiled. Okay, I'll tell him the truth. Luo Qingzhu tugged at Qin Feiyang's sleeve. After Qin Feiyang came back to his senses, he glanced at Shuiyang and turned to walk toward Fatso and Shizheng. Ling Yunfei, Luo Qingzhu, and Zhao Shuang quickly followed. Boss. Fatso came up and said flatteringly, Are you satisfied with Fat Lord's performance just now? Very satisfied. Keep it up. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile. Ling Yunfei put his arm around Fatso's shoulder and said with admiration, Brother Fatty, I'm not convinced of anything but your mouth. It's too sharp and too awesome. I'm afraid that no one in Yen City will dare to provoke you in the future. Of course, Fat Lord's mouth is tempered thousands of times. If anyone is not convinced, come and fight. Fatso strode forward with his head held high and glanced at the crowd below the square. He had the attitude of a master of words. At this moment, a large number of people fled. See, Fat Lord is not to be trifled with. Fatso looked at Qin Feiyang and the others proudly. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. The people who were in the limelight today were undoubtedly Ling Yunfei and Fatso. Ling Yunfei would definitely become the brightest star in Yen City in the future. As for Fatso, although his strength was not great, his mouth alone was enough to make anyone tremble in fear. In their hearts, Fatso was probably one of the people who should not be offended. Suddenly, a group of people surrounded them. They stood in front of Qin Feiyang and the others. What do you want? Shizheng stood in front of Qin Feiyang and looked at them vigilantly. Elder Shi, don't misunderstand. We are here to thank young Master Jiang. An old man in front hurriedly said. Young Master Jiang, my father has been suffering from internal injuries all these years. Ordinary healing pills can't cure him at all. Seeing his body getting worse day by day, I thought there was no hope. But a few days ago, I received a supreme healing pill from this fat brother. After taking it back and giving it to him, his internal injuries were healed. Young Master Jiang, you are my father's savior. Please accept my 3 bows. A middle-aged man in tattered clothes walked out of the crowd with tears in his eyes. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Qin Feiyang hurriedly ran down and helped him up. He smiled and said, Big brother, a word of thanks is enough. There is no need for such a big bow. It could be seen that this person's family was not well off. His strength was not strong. He belonged to the lowest class of people in Yen City. To Qin Feiyang, a peak-quality healing pellet was something he could easily refine. However, to this person, it might be an extravagant hope. The middle-aged man was very excited and said, Young Master Jiang, in fact, we have wanted to thank you in person for a long time, but we never had the chance. Yes, you are too busy. Young Master Jiang, you are much better than those people from the famous families. You are so young, but your heart is so kind. God will bless you. Yes, good people will definitely be rewarded. Everyone's face was full of grateful smiles. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Thank you everyone. I will continue to distribute pills to help more people. Young master is so kind. The people of Yen City are blessed. Everyone was overjoyed. The middle-aged man said loudly, "Everyone, quiet down and listen to me. Young Master Jiang is very busy, let's not waste too much of his time." Yes, yes, yes. Everyone move aside and let young Master Jiang pass. Take care, young master. Farewell, young Master Jiang. The people retreated to the side and bowed to send him off. This scene shook the hearts of everyone in the square. Commander Su Shuiyang, the black-armored guards, Shi Zheng, Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang, were all present. They did not expect the current Qin Feiyang to be so popular. He was afraid that as long as he said a word, half of the people in Yen City would stand on his side. After Qin Feiyang's group left, Shuiyang, Xiefang, and the others looked at each other and quickly turned to enter the palace. In a dazzling hall, the eldest prince sat on the golden throne with his head lowered and said nothing. His face was gloomy as water. Lin Hao stood on the left side of the throne, his face was also ashen. "Greetings, your highness." Shuiyang and the others walked into the hall and bowed. The eldest prince raised his head and looked at them, anger boiling in his heart. Shuiyang's heart trembled as he tactfully walked to Lin Hao's side. Xiefang and the others did not dare to move. They lowered their heads, not daring to look directly at the eldest prince. What a bunch of useless trash. You can't even force Jiang Haotian to make a move. What can I expect from you? The eldest prince's anger finally exploded as he pointed at the six and cursed. Xiefang hurriedly said, "Your Highness, please listen to my explanation." "Explanation? You swore to me that you could kill Jiang Haotian. But what happened in the end? You can't even kill Ling Yunfei. What else do you have to explain?" The eldest prince suddenly stood up and rushed to Xiefang shouting. Xiefang lowered his head again, his face pale. "And you? What did you say in front of me? Ling Yunfei is just a piece of trash, not worth mentioning. And now? Tell me who is the trash?" The eldest prince glanced at Wang Xia and the others and sneered. Wang Xia and the others were even more ashamed. They also did not expect that this unknown person was actually so ridiculously strong. The eldest prince glanced coldly at the six and returned to the golden throne. He looked at Shuiyang and said, "Why isn't Luo Qingzhu here?" Shuiyang said, "She said that she has some private matters to deal with and will come to find you another day. But according to my observation, her so-called private matters might be about Jiang Haotian." Smack. The eldest prince angrily slapped the armrest of the throne. Why was it that no matter where he was or who he met, it was always related to this bastard? There's one more thing. Now the people of Yen City have a good impression of Jiang Haotian. Shuiyang recounted the scene he saw in the square in detail. So he gave out free pills to please the people of Yen City? Lin Hao frowned. It can't be that simple. The eldest prince shook his head. Lin Hao and the others looked at the eldest prince in surprise. Why don't you think that as a peak-grade alchemist with the Martial Imperial Hall as his backing, does he need to please those ordinary people? Moreover, he doesn't seem like a charitable person. There must be some unspeakable secret. Xinchang, have you heard anything from the Martial Imperial Hall? The eldest prince looked at the disciple of the Martial Imperial Hall and asked. Xinchang thought for a moment and shook his head. No. I even went to inquire about it, but even Fatso and Lu Hong, who are closest to Jiang Haotian, don't know the reason. Even they don't know? The eldest prince and the others were in disbelief. Your Highness, you don't have to worry about this matter. It doesn't matter if he has a purpose. I don't believe that ordinary people can threaten us. Xinchang said with disdain. That's true. The eldest prince nodded and glanced at them. He waved his hand and said, You guys go back first. I need to think about how to make Jiang Haotian fall into eternal damnation in the finals. After thinking for a moment he added, Also pay attention to Jiang Haotian's whereabouts in the next few days. Yes. Shuiyang and the others bowed in response before turning around and leaving with large strides. Only Lin Hao remained behind. Chapter 187. Flying Phoenix House. In a luxurious pavilion, Qin Feiyang and the others gathered together. Zhao Shuang looked at Qin Feiyang with a complicated expression and shook her head. When I first met you, I really didn't expect you to be a top-grade alchemist. Qin Feiyang picked up his wine glass, sipped it gently, and said with a faint smile, "At that time, even I didn't know that I had talent in alchemy." Zhao Shuang said, "In short, your current achievements are really beyond my expectations." Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "What about you? Is everything going well in Xingyue City?" "Quite well. At that time, I passed the assessment very easily. In less than 2 months, I became a core disciple again. Of course, I have to thank Sister Qingju for giving me the Qi gathering pill and letting me use the cultivation room. My cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. A few days ago, I took the top-grade red fire glass pill you gave me, and now I'm barely a 9-star martial master." Zhao Shuang smiled playfully. 9-star martial master. Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other, their eyes full of disbelief. Zhao Shuang was about the same age as them. She had also broken through to 9-star martial master. How could these men endure it? "You relied on your own efforts, and I relied on the guidance of the law enforcement elder. We can't be compared," Zhao Shuang said modestly. "The law enforcement elder also gave me a lot of guidance." Ling Yunfei smiled bitterly. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Shuang, and then at Ling Yunfei. Ling Yunfei had been suppressed since he was young, which delayed his cultivation. Although Zhao Shuang didn't have such an experience, she was just a disciple of a little guy in Iron Ox Town, and her cultivation conditions were not much better. It seemed that the martial arts talent of the two was not much different. He looked at Luo Qingju again. She had been a proud daughter of heaven since she was young, and she had been doted on by thousands of people. Her starting point was not much higher than Ling Yunfei's, and her strength should be stronger than theirs. Zhao Shuang joked, "Sister Qingju's cultivation realm, you'd better not know, so as not to be shocked. So powerful." Stunned, Fatso asked curiously, "Tell me about it." 2-star martial ancestor, Zhao Shuang said. Suck. Other than Qin Feiyang, everyone sucked in a cold breath. They guessed that Luo Qingju's cultivation was definitely not low. After all, her status was there. But who would have thought that he would be so ridiculously strong? "Jiang Haotian, did you suffer a blow?" Zhao Shuang giggled. "It's all right." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. His heart was not that weak. Furthermore, if it weren't for the fact that he had wasted too much time copying the Huan formula, his current cultivation might have already caught up with Feng Ling Air. The few of them chatted until midnight before leaving the Flying Phoenix Pavilion. In the following 8 days, Qin Feiyang completely let go of his worries. Sometimes he would go out with Feng Ling Air to relax, and sometimes he would go shopping with Luo Qingju and Zhao Shuang. Don't say it. After a few days, he felt more relaxed than ever. On the night before the finals, Qin Feiyang came to the law enforcement hall alone. "What's the matter?" In the lounge, Elder Wan sat by the tea table and looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, "I want to see the hall master." "See the hall master?" Elder Wan was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Why do you want to see him?" Qin Feiyang said truthfully, "I want to use the hall master's power to open the door of potential." Elder Wan's face twitched and said disdainfully, "Kid, don't daydream. Go back and cultivate." "Elder, I'm not joking." Qin Feiyang was a little helpless. Indeed, the door of potential was difficult to open, but there was no need to be so disdainful. Elder One was completely frozen. After a long time, he came back to his senses. He got up and walked in front of Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "Haotian, this old man knows that your martial arts talent is not worse than your alchemy talent, but this kind of unrealistic thing, it's better not to delude yourself, okay?" Qin Feiyang had a wry smile on his face. He really wanted to tear off his clothes and let Elder One see the potential mark on his chest. However, he couldn't help but have this impulse. He smiled faintly and said, "Elder, it's because of this that I have to pursue higher things, so that I won't let down the talent that God has given me." "Why are you so stubborn? I'm doing this for your own good. Can't you just listen to me?" Elder One was a little angry. Qin Feiyang said, If I don't do it now, I will definitely regret it in the future. But this is unrealistic. Do you understand? Elder One blew his beard and glared at him, extremely angry. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "Where there is a will, there is a way. If you don't try, who knows what will happen in the end? Elder, this junior doesn't want to leave any regrets, please help me." Elder One was physically and mentally exhausted. He could be considered to have seen countless people, but this was the first time he had met such a stubborn kid. "Follow me." Looking at Qin Feiyang helplessly, Elder One turned around and walked out. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed and quickly followed. If it was in the imperial capital, there would be no need to go through so much trouble, because in the imperial capital, there was a place specially set up to open the door to potential. As long as one met the conditions, they could enter and give it a try. However, there were very few people who could successfully open it. Not to mention someone like him, who wanted to break through the limit of this realm every time he reached a new realm. So, he could only go to the palace master for help. The palace master of the martial imperial palace was at least an 8-star war emperor. If he fully released his pressure, it would be enough to give him a strong sense of oppression. Of course, Elder Wan and Elder Ji could do it too. However, Qin Feiyang wanted to be safer. A moment later, Elder Wan led Qin Feiyang to a courtyard. All around, the scenery of the mountains and rivers was pleasant. This was the most secluded corner of the martial imperial palace. It was also the forbidden area of the martial imperial palace. Other than Elder Wan and Elder Ji, no one dared to step in. Elder Wan said loudly, "Palace Master, Jiang Haotian wants to see you. Bring him in." Not long later, a calm voice rang out from the pavilion within the courtyard. When the two of them entered the living room of the pavilion, they saw the martial imperial palace master sitting in front of the tea table with a faint smile on his face. "Greetings, Palace Master." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and bowed. "What's the matter?" the martial imperial palace master asked doubtfully. "It's like this," Elder Wan simply explained. "Open the door of potential?" The martial imperial palace master was extremely surprised. Qin Feiyang was also quite nervous. Boom! All of a sudden, a monstrous pressure roared out from the martial imperial palace master's body. Qin Feiyang immediately felt that the surrounding space seemed to be frozen. He couldn't even move his feet. Even the blood in his body stopped flowing. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Gradually, he began to feel suffocated. The veins and blood vessels all over his body were exposed from under his skin. His facial features were almost distorted, making him look somewhat sinister. Fortunately, at this moment, the martial imperial palace master retracted his pressure. Qin Feiyang directly laid on the ground, gasping for breath. On his forehead, there were bean-sized beads of sweat dripping onto the ground. His face was also as pale as paper. The martial imperial palace master said, "How do you feel my pressure?" "Who?" Qin Feiyang let out a long breath, stood up, looked at him and nodded. "Very strong." One had to know. He was only a 9-star martial master right now. How could he withstand the pressure of an 8-star war emperor? The martial imperial palace master shook his head and said, "Although my pressure is very strong, it is still unable to help you break through the warrior's extreme realm. In the end, it is very likely that you will die under my pressure." Elder One nodded and said, "That's right. If this method worked, all the disciples of our martial imperial palace would have already opened the door of potential. So you should give up." No one understood these principles better than Qin Feiyang. Because in the past he had tried countless times in the imperial capital, but he had failed every time. But now, he was full of confidence. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, "Palace Master, I want to try my best." The martial imperial palace master was stunned. Originally, he thought that after explaining the pros and cons, this kid would give up. He didn't expect that he would insist on doing so. "Old Wan, you were right. This kid has a stubborn temper." He looked at Elder Wan and said helplessly. Elder Wan smiled bitterly. The martial imperial palace master looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "All right, since you won't cry until you enter the coffin, I will fulfill your wish. Are you ready?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, Not now, but tomorrow at the first prince's wedding ceremony. What? You want to do this at the first prince's wedding ceremony? The two of them were dumbfounded. Wasn't this clearly trying to steal the first prince's limelight? What the hell was this little bastard thinking in his head? Kid, you better think carefully. It would be best if you succeed, because you will create a miracle and your name will spread throughout the world. But if you fail, not only will you offend the royal family, you will also become the laughingstock of the world. Elder One tried his best to persuade him. I've thought it through. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists and said word by word with determination in his eyes. The two of them looked at each other, and the helplessness in their hearts couldn't be described with words. The martial imperial palace master said, "All right, I'll go crazy with you this time. I hope you can really do it. Also, don't forget your promise with Elder Ji." Promise? Qin Feiyang was stunned. I knew you were going to act shamelessly. Elder One stared at him and snorted. Let me remind you. You said that as long as we invite you to join the martial imperial palace tomorrow, you will nod your head and agree. Qin Feiyang slapped his head and nodded. That is indeed the case. Please don't worry, I will not go back on my words. The two of them laughed, because they couldn't think of a reason not to invite him. Qin Feiyang thanked him and turned around to leave. Back at the soothing lake, he stood by the lakeside and looked at the calm surface of the lake. His eyes gradually became sharp. Fatso and Lu Hong walked to his side. Fatso smiled. Boss, tomorrow is the day of the showdown. Are you ready? But even if you fail and live a life of running for your life, we will continue to follow you. Thank you. Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them with a gentle gaze. Fatso said unhappily, Why are you thanking us? Aren't you being too polite? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. Your main task tomorrow is to watch Lin Chong. Before I say anything, don't let him come out and cause trouble. No problem. The two of them nodded. At the same time, Wolf King in the ancient castle became excited. Chapter 188. The three of them stood by the lake for the whole night. Apart from the initial conversation, they did not say anything else. The morning sun rose. Everything came back to life. Qin Feiyang looked up at the sky and muttered, I hope everything will go as I wish. He retracted his gaze and looked at Fatso. Call Lin Chong out and get ready to go. Okay. Fatso turned and ran into the attic. After a while, he walked out with Lin Chong. Are you confident? Lin Chong hurried to Qin Feiyang and asked in a low voice. No one is confident in this kind of thing. Qin Feiyang said lightly and walked toward the wooden bridge. Shizheng also jumped down from the balcony and followed closely behind him. The square outside the palace. At this moment, the place was decorated with lanterns and colored banners and loud music. There was a red carpet on the ground that led to the center of the square. There were dozens of chairs neatly placed there. Beside each chair was a wooden table that was exquisitely carved. Plates of fragrant and sweet fruits were placed on top of the table. Of course, wine was indispensable. Outside the square, before dawn, there was a sea of people gathered. All around, the palace guards were like javelins. Their bodies were straight and their eyes were sharp. The long spears in their hands were shining with shocking sharpness. Commander Su and Lin Hao stood at the entrance of the square, welcoming the guests with smiles on their faces. Family Head Chi has arrived. Family Head Li has arrived. Family Head He has arrived. The first to arrive were the family heads of the major families in Yen City. Beside them were one or two teenagers or young men. After all, this was a good opportunity to curry favor with the eldest prince. Xie Feng and the other five had already arrived. They gathered at the side and discussed in low voices. Why isn't Jiang Haotian here yet? Don't worry, he will come. That's right. All the big shots in Yen City will be here today. He won't miss this good opportunity to perform. In the arena later, I must make him kneel and beg for mercy. A cold light flashed in their eyes. Whoosh! At this moment, a few figures broke through the air and landed in the center of the square. They were Jiang Jingyi, Manager Li, Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuanger. Lin Hao hurriedly stepped forward and cupped his fists. Pavilion Master Jiang, Manager Li, please take a seat. Pavilion Master Jiang nodded. Big shots like him and Manager Li naturally sat in the first row. The patriarchs of the clans who had arrived first also stood up to welcome them. As for the young people, their gazes wandered around Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang'er's bodies. They were filled with amazement. A short while later, Ma Cheng Jiahe, an elder he also arrived. Shuiyang, Wuxia, and Xiafang immediately ran to their side. Lin Hao walked to Xin Chang's side and said in a low voice, "Xin Chang, what is your Martial Imperial Hall doing? Why isn't he here yet?" Just as Xin Chang was about to speak, he suddenly raised his head to look at the distant sky and said in a low voice, "They're here." Lin Hao looked up. Decisively, several figures streaked across the sky and landed on the square. They were the Martial King Hall's Hall Master, Elder Wan, and Elder Ji. Beside him were Qin Feiyang, Feng Ling-er, Ling Yunfei, Fatso, and Shi Zheng. Greetings to the three lords. Greetings to the Hall Master. Greetings to the two elders. Lin Hao and Xin Chang hurriedly ran over and bowed. The Martial King Hall's Hall Master glanced at Xin Chang and said indifferently, "Although there are some things that I don't object to, sometimes you have to distinguish your own position." Xin Chang's body stiffened. It was obvious. He had helped the first prince to deal with Qin Feiyang, which had already caused the Hall Master's dissatisfaction. Lin Hao's eyes flashed slightly as he smiled. "Lords, please take a seat." The Martial King Hall's Hall Master turned around and glanced at the people on the seats. He walked straight to Jiang Jingyi's side and deliberately distanced himself from the three heads of the Danwang Hall. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice, "Fatso, you guys go outside." Fatso and Lu Hong nodded and led Lin Chang out of the square. Standing in the first row of the crowd, Shi Zheng was also beside the three of them. Qin Feiyang, Ling Yunfei, and Feng Ling-er turned around and walked behind Elder Wan and the other two, standing side by side. Xin Chang hesitated for a moment, and also walked over. But no one paid attention to him. They directly treated him as heir, making him feel very awkward. Jiang Jingyi chatted with the Martial King Hall's Hall Master for a while, then turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "I heard from my daughter that you guys know each other?" Qin Feiyang nodded. Manager Li smiled and asked, "Brother Jiang, now can you tell us what kind of pill you are going to refine?" As soon as these words came out, Qin Feiyang became the focus of attention. Jiang Jingyi was very curious. The Martial King Hall's Hall Master and the other two were very puzzled. The others felt a chill in their hearts as they looked at Qin Feiyang one after another. Their eyes carried a trace of flattery. Ma Cheng and the other two in the Danwang Hall looked a little gloomy. They were all alchemy masters and the leaders of the Danwang Hall. But now when it came to pills, the first thing that came to everyone's mind was Qin Feiyang, not them. This made them feel very embarrassed, and jealousy rose in their hearts. Qin Feiyang glanced at the crowd, then looked at Manager Li and the others and said with a smile, "This is a secret." Manager Li immediately rolled his eyes. However, his words piqued everyone's curiosity. So secretive. Could it be that he had refined some amazing pill again? Everyone pondered in their hearts. It seemed that they had to find a chance to build a relationship with this person. Ling Yunfei walked to Xin Chang and whispered, "Can you tell us how the first prince is going to deal with us today?" "I don't know." Xin Chang shook his head. Ling Yunfei smiled evilly and said, "For him, you don't even care about the friendship of your sect. How can you not know?" "I don't want to talk nonsense with you. If you have the ability, let's meet in the arena," Xin Chang said in a low voice. At this moment, Elder Wan and Elder Ji turned to look at Xin Chang. Their eyes were very calm. But Xin Chang immediately lowered his head, his heart at a loss. Ling Yunfei lifted the corner of his mouth and pursed a trace of sarcasm. He walked to Qin Feiyang and whispered to Luo Qingzhu and the others, "King Yan has arrived. King Yan has arrived." Not long after, accompanied by a loud and clear voice, the King of Yan and the eldest prince walked out of the palace, surrounded by a group of maidservants. Both father and son looked very happy today. The first prince was wearing a brand new golden robe, and a belt embroidered with gold was tied around his waist. He looked particularly energetic. He followed behind King Yan and bowed to everyone one by one. But when he saw Qin Feiyang and Ling Yunfei, A cold light flashed in his eyes. King Yin walked to the front and said with a smile, "Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend my son's wedding ceremony. If there is anything that is not satisfactory, please forgive me." Next, it was inevitable for them to be polite. Qin Feiyang had seen too many of such scenes, and he was conflicted from the bottom of his heart. Especially when he saw those hypocritical faces, his heart was full of disgust. The first prince walked to Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "Brother Jiang, have you finished refining the elixirs?" "Of course." Qin Feiyang smiled, took out a jade box from his arms and handed it over. The first prince opened it and took a look. There were exactly 5 supreme-grade red fire glaze elixirs. At the same time, the eyes of the young people of the big families also became scorching hot. Everyone wanted the supreme-grade red fire glaze elixirs, but few people could afford the high price. The most important thing was, even if they had the money, they might not be able to buy it, because the quantity was too rare. Even the treasure pavilion did not have any stock. The first prince put away the jade box and said with a smile, "Thank you, Brother Jiang. There is one more thing I want to ask Brother Jiang. Even if Brother Jiang is defeated in the finals, you must come to the royal banquet." "Okay," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "Then it's settled." The first prince smiled and turned to talk with the young people of the other families. Feng Lingair said, "It seems that he thinks that you will be defeated." Qin Feiyang looked at Xia Feng and the other 6 people and said with a smile, "Then let's wait and see." Zhao Shuang looked around and said, "The groom is here, why hasn't the bride come yet? I really want to see Yi's appearance now." Although the Zhao family and the Lin family had disputes over interests, they were also good friends. Ling Yunfei shook his head and said, "It's not you who is getting married. Why are you in such a hurry?" Zhao Shuang was about to speak. Chirp. But suddenly, a loud eagle cry sounded in the sky and spread in all directions. Everyone stopped talking and looked up. They saw a huge iron eagle, spreading its wings and soaring from a distance. Seeing the iron eagle, everyone knew who it was, because only the Lin family's mount was an iron eagle. And this iron eagle was the mount of the Lin family's family master, Lin Han. Although Yen City had rules that prohibited flying beasts, today was a special day. No one would blame the Lin family for doing this. However, no one noticed it. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. When he was in Iron Ox Town, this iron eagle also chased after him. Woo-woo. With a gust of wind, the iron eagle landed on the square. 4 people stood on its back. The leader was a red-haired old man. He had his hands behind his back, his eyes were bright, and his whole body exuded a strong aura. Lin Han and Lin Yi stood behind the old man. On the right side of Lin Yi, there was a charming lady. The eldest prince strode over and bowed to the red-haired old man. "Greetings, Senior Lin." The red-haired old man stepped on the ground and said with a smile, "Today is your wedding with Yi. Let's skip these customs. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take Yi." "Yes, yes." The eldest prince nodded repeatedly and reached out to pull Lin Yi. However, to everyone's surprise, Lin Yi deliberately avoided him and walked down from the iron eagle's back. The smile on the eldest prince's face suddenly froze. Lin Han frowned and said with a smile, "Eldest prince, don't mind her. After all, there are so many people. It's normal for Yi to be shy." The eldest prince regained his smile and nodded. "Uncle is right." He bowed to the lady again. "Greetings, Auntie." The lady smiled and said, "You should change the way you address me later." "Change the way I address you?" Qin Feiyang's eyes turned cold. "I'm afraid this address will never be changed." At the same time, Lin Chong, who was outside the square, clenched his hands together tightly. His face was full of resentment. Originally, the person standing next to Yi at this moment should be him. But now, as her biological father, he could only watch from the sidelines. He hated it. Chapter 189. Fatso pressed his shoulder and whispered, "Behave yourself. If you ruin the boss's plan, even if the boss doesn't kill you, Fat Lord will kill you." Lu Hong whispered, "You don't have to kill him. When his identity is exposed, The first person to kill him will be Lin Han. Hearing this, Lin Chang trembled physically and mentally. He immediately dispelled the thought in his heart. In the square, Lin Yi followed Lin Han and the others, walking along the red carpet towards King Yan. She wore a golden floor-length dress with a headdress like a phoenix coronet on her head. She was less pure and more noble than before. However, there was not the slightest bit of joy on her delicate face. Even that pair of lively eyes seemed a little empty at this moment. She was married, but the person she was going to marry was not him. She really hoped that he could suddenly appear and take her away. She would follow him without hesitation. No matter what hardship she would experience in the future, she was willing to do so. But she knew that this was an extravagant hope. He might have forgotten her. He might have even forgotten that today was the day she got married to another man. Like a walking corpse, she followed Lin Han and bowed to one unfamiliar face after another. Even when she saw her former good friend, Zhao Shuang'er, her eyes were dull. When she passed by Qin Feiyang, she didn't realize that this was the man she wanted to see. Sigh. Zhao Shuang'er sighed secretly. It was obvious how much Lin Yi hated this wedding. However, she who had no status and no strong background, could only choose to obey. The world was so cruel. But fortunately Qin Feiyang came. This wedding was destined to be unsuccessful. Qin Feiyang was also distressed. The original Lin Yi was so simple and kind. But now, these were no longer on her face. He wanted to stand up now and stop this unequal wedding, but reason told him that now was not the time. Ling Yunfei glanced at him and whispered, "I know you love her very much, but don't be impulsive." Qin Feiyang nodded. After a while, after Lin Yi saluted, she followed Lin Han and sat on the main seat. The king of Yen looked at the eldest prince and smiled. "Didn't you organize a competition? Since everyone is here, let's begin." "Yes." The first prince replied respectfully. He got up and strode to the center of the square. He looked around in high spirits. "I believe that everyone has been looking forward to this finals for a long time. I'm the same as everyone else. I'm really looking forward to seeing which young genius will be able to suppress everyone and take the first place. I won't talk about anything else. I'll just talk about the rules of the finals. First, you are not allowed to kill anyone. Second, you are not allowed to use any weapons. Thirdly, during the competition, you are not allowed to take any pills. Anyone who violates the rules will be disqualified. In order to ensure the fairness of the competition, I will personally host the finals. The opponents will be decided by drawing lots. Now let's invite the 10 participating young geniuses to draw lots." With a wave of his hand, the first prince took out a bamboo tube. There were 10 bamboo sticks in the bamboo tube. Looking at the 10 bamboo sticks, the first prince's eyes flashed. In the meantime, Xie Fang and the other 5 walked out and walked towards the first prince. "Let's go," Qin Feiyang said lightly and led Ling Yunfei over. Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang also followed. When the 10 people walked up, the first prince said with a smile, "There's a number on the other end of the bamboo stick. Those who draw 1 and 9 will start the first round. I'll draw first." Xie Fang walked forward and blocked everyone's view. The first prince looked down at the bamboo stick on the left. Xie Fang directly took the bamboo stick. Xie Fang stepped back, and Wang Xia followed. Under the first prince's instructions, she also took out a bamboo stick. Then it was Shen Chang, and the 3 youths from the Lin family and the royal family. Finally, it was Ling Yunfei, Luo Qingzhu and Zhao Shuang'er. All of this, Qin Feiyang saw it all. Although he didn't know the actual situation, he could imagine that the first prince would definitely do something. "I'd like to see what kind of tricks you can play." He took a step forward, took the last bamboo stick, looked down, and said indifferently, "Number 5, who is the other one?" "Me." A teenager from the royal family stood up and looked at him provocatively. Ling Yunfei followed and asked, "Then who is number 1? Because the bamboo stick in his hand was number 9. In other words, he was the first to appear. "It's me." Shen Chang waved the bamboo stick. The corner of Ling Yunfei's mouth lifted, and he threw away the bamboo slip, saying, "Then let's begin." The others tactfully retreated to the distance. The first prince looked at the 2 of them and said, I'll say it again, stop here, begin. As soon as he finished, he took a step back. At the same time, Shen Chong took the lead to rush towards Ling Yunfei, his entire body erupting with a powerful aura, the true qi in his palm gushing out. The moment the illusionary palm came out, 9 afterimages flashed in the air, too much for the eye to take in. At this moment, the 3 giants of the martial imperial palace couldn't help but frown. Even if you want to be a lackey, you have to choose the right person. Ling Yunfei laughed sarcastically, stepped on the origin returning steps, and easily dodged the attack of the illusionary palm. Let me tell you, you won't be arrogant for long. Shen Chong sneered, and suddenly took a step forward, quickly approaching Ling Yunfei. His speed was actually twice as fast as before. Ling Yunfei was surprised. Was this an auxiliary martial skill? Surprised? What's even more surprising is yet to come. Shen Chong laughed complacently, his 5 fingers suddenly clenched tightly, and a punch was thrown out. This punch actually carried a faint trace of domineering aura. It was as if an overlord had descended. Overlord Fist. Ling Yunfei frowned. Even the Overlord Fist was taught to this person. The first prince was truly generous. Now you still dare to say that you're not someone's lackey? Ling Yunfei sneered. The heart-lock killing fist suddenly attacked, and collided with Shen Chong's fist. Bang! At that moment, the two of them retreated. However, Shen Chong only retreated 2 steps before he stabilized his body. Then he dived again, rushing to the front of Ling Yunfei, and the illusionary palm hit him head-on. The palm wind was extremely fierce. This is impossible. Ling Yunfei frowned, and used the origin returning steps to the limit, narrowly avoiding the palm. At the same time, a glint flashed through Qin Feiyang's eyes. Both of them were 9-star martial masters, and both of them had perfect martial skills, so their strength should be equal. But why did Shen Chong only take 2 steps back? Moreover, Ling Yunfei's mouth overflowed with a trace of blood. Shen Chong's face was only pale? He did not believe that Shen Chong had already broken through to 1-star martial ancestor, because the strength of a martial ancestor was at least 10 times stronger than a 9-star martial master. If he was really a 1-star martial ancestor, Ling Yunfei would have already fallen to the ground with serious injuries. What are you running for? If you have the guts, fight me head-on. Shen Chong continued to provoke Ling Yunfei while chasing after him. Humph! Ling Yunfei snorted coldly, stomped his foot on the ground, and did not continue to dodge. True qi gushed out, and a punch was thrown out. Overlord Fist. Shen Chong shouted in a low voice, and his fist was covered with true qi. The 2 fists met with a loud bang. Thump. The previous situation appeared once again. Ling Yunfei kept retreating, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. But Shen Chong only took 2 steps back, and then pounced towards Ling Yunfei. Ling Yunfei used the origin returning steps and continued to dodge. Luo Qingzhu said, "Something's wrong." Zhao Shuang'er said, "With Ling Yunfei's strength and actual combat experience, Shen Chong can't be his opponent. There must be a problem." Qin Feiyang raised his head and glanced at Xie Fang and the others. On their faces, there was a trace of a smug sneer. "What's wrong?" He looked at Shen Chong again, and his brows were tightly knitted into a line. The martial imperial hall master, and the others were also a little suspicious. Didn't they say that Ling Yunfei defeated Xie Fang and Wang Xia by himself? But why did it seem that it didn't live up to the name now? In order to deal with you, I have put in a lot of effort. I even took the risk of being blamed by my father to teach them the Overlord Fist. If they can't win like this, then they are really trash. The eldest prince crossed his arms in front of his chest with a bright smile on his face. But then, his heart sank again, because he suddenly realized that Ling Yunfei's speed was at least twice as fast as Shen Chong's. In other words, the auxiliary martial skill that Ling Yunfei mastered was a perfect martial skill. If he continued to hide like this, it would probably become a big problem. Damn it! Even a low-level auxiliary martial skill was very rare, let alone a perfect level auxiliary martial skill. Where did this person get it? Shen Chong's auxiliary martial skill was actually given by him. And in order to get this martial skill, He used all his connections, spent 3 days, and paid a huge price. In the end, it didn't work at all. How annoying. It was also at this moment. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up and shouted to Ling Yunfei, "Take off his clothes." And the eldest prince looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Did he see through it so quickly? Clothes? Ling Yunfei was stunned. Although he didn't know what was going on, he didn't doubt Qin Feiyang's words at all. The next moment, he took the initiative to attack. After a few exchanges, he grabbed Shen Chong's clothes and pulled hard. With a poochie sound, Shen Chong's clothes were torn off on the spot. Inside there was also a thin undergarment. But Qin Feiyang could tell at a glance that it was not undergarment, but soft armor. Soft armor, soft as silk. Not only could it play a defensive role, it could also help Shen Chong remove a portion of the external force. This was the reason why Ling Yunfei had suffered so many losses. Qin Feiyang looked at the eldest prince and frowned. "What explanation do you have?" "I don't know either." The eldest prince shook his head and said innocently, "Although I said just now that weapons are not allowed, soft armor is a defensive armor and can't be considered a weapon, so Shen Chong didn't break the rules." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. He retracted his gaze and looked at the two people in the field. Meeting such a shameless person, he was helpless and didn't want to waste his breath. He said indifferently, "Ling Yunfei, Shen Chong has a soft armor to protect his body. It's not unbreakable, observe carefully." "How to break it?" Ling Yunfei muttered secretly, dodging while observing Shen Chong. Very quickly, he understood. Chapter 190. Haha. Let's see how you break through my defense. Shen Chong laughed. His laughter was filled with mockery that could not be dispersed. It's too easy to break through your defense. Ling Yunfei took a few steps forward and circled behind Shen Chong like lightning. His palm was like a blade as he slapped the back of Shen Chong's head. With a bang, Shen Chong fell to the ground and fainted. You should be glad. If it wasn't for that stupid rule, your head would have exploded. Ling Yunfei laughed disdainfully. He turned to look at the first prince and said indifferently, "Why aren't you announcing the result?" Defeated? The first prince was stunned. Xie Feng and the others were also dumbfounded. The crowd outside the arena was even more dumbfounded. Wasn't this victory too easy? Even the big shots in the square were a little stunned. Jiang Jingyi sighed. This Jiang Haotian is indeed not simple. His calm attitude when facing trouble is simply terrifying. Manager Li laughed, although it was because of Jiang Haotian's reminder. If Ling Yunfei wasn't smart enough, he wouldn't have been able to react. This kid is indeed a talent. Jiang Jingyi looked at the Martial Imperial Hall Master and said helplessly, "Yan Nanshan, why are you so lucky? A few years ago, Feng Ling Air came and the limelight hasn't passed yet. Now there's another Ling Yunfei. It's impossible not to be jealous. Even if you're jealous, you can only stare." Yan Nanshan's face was full of smiles. He was very pleased with himself. In fact, he was also surprised. As the Martial Imperial Hall Master, he couldn't pay attention to every disciple. He knew that Ling Yunfei was Ling Feng's son, but he didn't know the details. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes today, he wouldn't have known that another monster had come to the Martial Imperial Hall. A 16-year-old 9-star martial master with such astonishing battle awareness and actual combat experience could only be described as monstrous. On the other hand, he didn't look at Shen Chong anymore, as if he didn't treat him as a disciple of the Martial Imperial Hall. If someone was happy, there would naturally be someone who was worried. The Lin family, the royal family, and the Danwang Hall were all very unhappy. The first prince even gave the overlord fist to Shen Chong. Even a fool could see that he was deliberately targeting Qin Feiyang and his group. If he succeeded, everyone would be happy. However, Shen Chong was defeated. This was not Shen Chong's face but the first prince's. More importantly, today was the wedding ceremony of the eldest prince and Lin Yi. Such a thing was simply discrediting the royal family and the Lin family. As for the Danwang Hall, there was no reason for them to hate Ling Yunfei. If he had to find a reason, he could only blame Ling Yunfei for being Qin Feiyang's friend. In short, they had already lost their minds. They hated anyone related to Qin Feiyang. Seeing that the eldest prince was in a daze for a long time, the king of Yen felt embarrassed and shouted, "Why are you dawdling? Hurry up and announce the results." The first prince quivered and came back to his senses. A bright smile quickly crept onto his face. Congratulations to Ling Yunfei for advancing to the next round of the competition. Even if he was reluctant, he could only force a smile now. "Let's see how long you can pretend." Ling Yunfei sneered secretly, turned around, and walked toward Qin Feiyang with Guthyuan steps. The first prince looked at his back, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. After asking Commander Su to carry Shenchong down, he smiled and said, "Next, number 2 and number 8 will compete." On Qin Feiyang's side, Zhao Shuang'er walked out. On the opposite side was Xiefang. It turns out to be just her. Xiefang glanced at Zhao Shuang'er with disdain in his heart. The two stood opposite each other, separated by 10 meters. Xiefang bowed like a gentleman and smiled. "Miss Shuang'er, I never bully women. You should take the initiative to admit defeat." "Really?" Zhao Shuang'er asked timidly. Xiefang nodded, seeming to want to say something. Swish. But at this moment, Zhao Shuang'er took a step forward, like a breeze, and in the blink of an eye, she appeared behind Xiefang. It was Gale's steps. Following closely, she stretched out her hand and slapped the back of Xiefang's head like Ling Yunfei did to Shenchong. Bang! At this moment, Xiefang fell to the ground like a dog eating shit, with a black and blue nose and swollen eyes. Immediately, Zhao Shuang'er stepped on Xiefang's back, revealing an innocent smile and asked, "Now tell me who bullied who?" Xiefang was completely confused. Until now he still didn't know what had happened. The first prince and Wang Xia were also dumbstruck. The sea of people outside the arena fell into a dead silence. Defeated Xiefang in one move? This little girl was too fierce, wasn't she? Only Qin Feiyang and the other two were not surprised at all, because they knew that Zhao Shuang'er's strength was not only a 9-star martial master, but also mastered the perfect auxiliary martial skill Gale steps. Even if Xiefang went all out, he might not be her opponent. But he was recklessly showing off there, and even boasted that he didn't bully women? Wasn't this looking for abuse? There was another person who was more surprised than anyone present. He was Lin Chong. It could be said that he watched Zhao Shuang'er grow up, and he knew Zhao Shuang'er well. In his impression, Zhao Shuang'er was not very outstanding. But it had only been a year since he last saw her. How could she be so ridiculously strong? At the same time, there was also a hint of surprise in Lin Yi's empty eyes. "I was actually trampled under the foot of a woman?" Xiefang finally reacted. There was no suspense. Suddenly, he became angry out of humiliation. His true energy surged out like a tide. Don't underestimate women in the future. Zhao Shuang'er pursed her lips and smiled. Then, she raised her jade foot and kicked Xiefang's temple directly. Xiefang screamed and flew out on the spot. Finally, he rolled in front of the first prince and fainted. The first prince looked at Zhao Shuang'er, then looked down at Xiefang at his feet. The anger in his heart was uncontrollable. He really wanted to kick him. He resisted this thought, looked up at Commander Su and smiled. Take him over to recuperate. What was the most aggrieved thing for a person? It was the first prince's current state. His heart was about to explode from anger, but he still had to show a smile. Yes. Commander Su quickly ran over, and ran to Ma Cheng and the others with Xiefang in his arms. After taking out a healing pill for Xiefang to consume, he threw him directly to Ma Cheng and the others, turned around, and ran away. Useless trash, take him away from me, so as not to make a fool of himself. Jia He yelled angrily. His dark face was so gloomy that it almost dripped water. Shui Yang, who was next to him, trembled. He quickly picked up Xiefang and ran to the back. Great! However, on the other side, Yin Nanshan slapped the table and applauded regardless of the occasion. Although Zhao Shuang'er was a disciple of Star Moon City's Martial Lord Hall, she was also under his command. Looking at his disciples showing off their prowess one after another, as the hall master, he felt that his face was especially bright. Elder Wan and the beautiful woman were also beaming with joy, like a spring breeze. Look at how proud you guys are. Jiang Jingyi, who was at the side, rolled his eyes. Haha. I'm proud, so what? Yan Nanshan laughed and looked at him provocatively. It was as if he was saying, if you have the ability, why don't you also find 2 such monsters? Jiang Jingyi didn't think much of it. However, Ma Cheng and the others unconsciously clenched their fists. Their eyes were extremely cold, because that laughter was too ear-piercing. It was like an invisible slap that fiercely slapped their faces. The 3 of them looked at Wuxia. Wuxia noticed the 3 people's gazes and nodded heavily. The first prince said, "Next, number 3 and number 7 will go on stage." Luo Qingzhu and Wuxia walked towards each other at the same time. Why is it her? Wuxia frowned and whispered, "No matter who it is, I must win this battle." Luo Qingzhu's expression didn't show any contempt, nor was it serious. She seemed very calm. Wuxia smiled and said, "Sister Qingzhu, sorry to offend you." Luo Qingzhu just smiled lightly. Wuxia's face turned serious. True energy gushed out from her palm. She suddenly swooped down and rushed in front of Luo Qingzhu. Her palm whistled out. The wind from her palm blew up Luo Qingzhu's dress and hair. She also waved her palm. However, this was just an ordinary palm. There wasn't even a trace of true energy. Seeing this, Wuxia said angrily, "Luo Qingzhu, don't look down on people." Before her voice faded, the 2 palms collided. Puff. Wuxia suddenly spat out blood. She couldn't control her feet and retreated more than 10 meters. "I'm not looking down on you. I'm just afraid of hurting you. Thank you." Luo Qingzhu lowered her slender arm and smiled faintly at Wuxia. She then turned and walked to Zhao Shuang's side. She looked up at the first prince and waited for him to announce the result. However, the first prince didn't seem to see it. He lowered his head and his face was green and red. There were only 5 matches in total. The other party had already won 3 matches in a row. He was now beginning to regret holding this competition. Jiang Jingyi was very proud. He looked at Yan Nanshan and said with a smile, "How is my daughter? She's much stronger than your 2 monstrous disciples." Yan Nanshan said disdainfully, "If they had a father like you, it's hard to say who's stronger and who's weaker. Moreover, your daughter is also a disciple of the Martial Imperial Hall. What are you so proud of?" Jiang Jingyi's face stiffened and he said angrily, "I shouldn't have let her enter the Martial Imperial Hall." Yan Nanshan said disdainfully, "Is it up to you to decide whether she enters the Martial Imperial Hall or not? Moreover, it's too late to regret now." Hearing this, Jiang Jingyi seemed to have something stuck in his throat and his face turned red. As for Ma Cheng and the other 2, they were too ashamed to continue staying. However, because of King Yan and the Lin family's ancestor, they couldn't leave first. All their anger could only be suppressed in their hearts. King Yan glanced at the first prince and frowned slightly. He ordered, "Commander Su, you go and preside." He couldn't lose face anymore. Otherwise, today's wedding would definitely become a joke. "Yes." Commander Su bowed and replied. He ran to the first prince and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, leave this to me. Go and rest for a while." The first prince nodded and walked to King Yan's side in a daze. He lowered his head and didn't say a word. For this final match, in order to humiliate Qin Feiyang, he had searched for auxiliary martial techniques, forged a defensive soft armor, and even taught him the Overlord Fist. It could be said that he was worried sick. However, he had put in so much effort, but in the end he didn't get anything. He really couldn't accept this cruel fact. This competition shouldn't have been held in the first place. This was asking for humiliation. Seeing that his son had been dealt such a blow and had completely lost his previous confidence, the anger in King Yan's heart grew stronger. He glanced at Qin Feiyang from the corner of his eyes, and a trace of shocking hostility flashed past the depths of his eyes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.